Today's case tells the story of one of the most insane fraud schemes you've ever come across. This story is absurd to the point of impossibility. Some might even say it couldn't happen, but the tragic end of a once-loving couple speaks for itself. One of the most unimaginable cases involving catfishing. In 2021, a man named Nathaniel began cheating on his fiancée, a woman named Linda. And from that moment, his entire life turned upside down. He started receiving a ton of crazy messages from different people and found himself at the center of a complex fraud scheme. The outcome of this story is horrific. It's still unknown whether the man ever realized who was truly behind this madness. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born in 1993 near Chicago. From early childhood, the boy stood out for his disobedience and bad behavior in class, and after graduating high school, he already had serious run-ins with the law. Nathaniel went to jail multiple times and got out. In 2016, he was arrested on charges of assault. In 2017, it was drunk driving with aggravating circumstances. Driving drunk was, by the way, a regular thing for him. The young man had one irresistible passion: his love for firearms. He enjoyed showing off his collection. He constantly posted tons of photos on social media, decked out in full gear. By the way, some of his weapons got him in trouble with the law more than once. And eventually, he received a court order banning him from ever owning firearms. But the guy didn't care about that law either. He simply ignored all the restrictions. A few years later, Huey started his own private security company, offering his services as a bodyguard. Given the court order prohibiting him from owning firearms, Nathaniel's business couldn't be called legal or licensed, but that didn't seem to bother him at all. The young man calmly advertised his company on social media, continuing to show off his weapons: pistols, knives, assault rifles, suppressors, ammunition, and more, without much concern about who might see it. Somehow, despite completely ignoring the ban on owning weapons, Huey got away with it for years. At the time, Nathaniel was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Ermelinda, or Linda Paloma. They had been together for over 5 years. When they met, Huey was 22 and his girlfriend was 42. Ermelinda was 20 years older than her partner. The woman had previously been married, after which she had 5 children. The kids were grown, and by then, Linda already had 5 grandchildren. Although Paloma's children were almost the same age as her new boyfriend, Nathaniel and Linda eventually got engaged. Their relationship reached a new level. Though they weren't officially married yet, they already called each other husband and wife. In a small house in Streamwood, Illinois, lived 28-year-old Nathaniel, 48-year-old Linda, and some of her children and even grandchildren. With so many people in one space, disputes and scandals were constant. Linda's kids didn't like her partner. They thought he was an angry and aggressive person. Perhaps Nathaniel deliberately tried to assert himself this way, crafting an image of a tough guy. By 2021, Huey and Paloma had been together for about 6 years. The initial passion had faded, and Nathaniel began cheating on Linda with various women. It's possible he'd behaved this way before, but he'd managed to keep it hidden. Now, though, the man was going all out, sincerely believing Linda had no clue about his affairs. He genuinely thought he was very clever and that all his escapades on the side remained a secret. However, it didn't take Linda long to figure it all out. A mature, experienced woman, she didn't throw tantrums or openly show jealousy. She didn't try to confront his numerous mistresses or issue ultimatums to her would-be husband. Paloma didn't even break off the engagement, deciding that revenge is a dish best served cold. Friends, please support these videos with your activity. Subscribe to the channel, put a like on this video, and write a comment when you watch the video. Your activity is very valuable. Thank you. Linda decided to make Nathaniel a victim of catfishing. Catfishing is a type of fraud where someone creates a fake account or profile on social media, usually targeting a specific victim. This practice can be used for financial gain, to compromise the victim, or as a way to control another user through messages from non-existent people. In early December 2021, Linda sat down at her laptop and created several fake profiles on various social media platforms and messengers. Instead of profile pictures, she uploaded random images of other users found online. The woman's main goal was to capture her fiancé's attention, to get him to stop cheating and give up his side romances. Linda carefully planned the scheme for the upcoming deception and got to work. The betrayed woman realized she needed to constantly track Nathaniel's movements, so she started Googling the following information: what is the darknet, how to access it, and how to use it safely. The darknet is the shadow internet or hidden network. It's a secretive segment of the internet, not indexed by common search engines like Google or others. The hallmark of the darknet is multi-layered data encryption and user anonymity. You can only access the dark side of the internet using special software. Linda installed a browser for working in the hidden network on her laptop and downloaded a bunch of spyware to monitor her fiancé, track his every move, read his messages, and trace his location without Huey's knowledge. After that, the furious woman decided to contact Nathaniel from one of her fake profiles. The first account supposedly belonged to a Bulgarian woman in her 40s. Instead of a profile picture, Linda used a random photo from a search engine. She started the conversation with a simple greeting, and Nathaniel responded immediately. The acquaintance quickly turned into casual chatting, then flirting. Most likely the man, who wasn't picky about his connections, thought he'd start a romance with this mysterious woman. But she unexpectedly told him that her husband was a member of the Bulgarian mafia, and that this mafia was tracking Nathaniel's every move. Then the stranger promised Huey big trouble if he didn't follow their instructions. Caught off guard, the man was stunned. He was in shock and didn't understand what was happening. Nathaniel tried to laugh it off, but his pen pal pointed out his exact location at that moment. The woman explained that Huey had long been on the Bulgarian mafia's hook, and they knew his every step. To back up her words, she recounted details of recent messages sent to Nathaniel's phone, scaring him even more. He was completely thrown off. Believing that if hackers could access his messages, he was indeed dealing with gang members, Nathaniel agreed to follow the Bulgarian woman's instructions. Their communication continued. What the man didn't suspect was that the leader of the Bulgarian mafia was sitting in the next room. The correspondence with the Bulgarian woman went on for months, and Linda moved to the next level of catfishing. She began introducing Nathaniel to other fake characters. Paloma created an entire network of different profiles. At some point, they all started interacting with each other and with her hapless boyfriend. Among them was a man nicknamed Turtle, who was a hitman. There was also a woman named Ignis, whose husband was a member of a Mexican cartel. Nathaniel was also messaged by Lisa, Claudia, Edgar, Skrilla, and Fernando. Each had their own role. One was a crime boss, another a hacker, a third a debt collector, and so on. They all played carefully planned roles and seemed intimidating. From his correspondence with all these people, Nathaniel concluded that the Bulgarian mafia and the Mexican cartel had teamed up to devise a complex criminal plot. He still didn't understand his role in this operation, but was mentally preparing for the worst. Linda Paloma, Huey's fiancée, took her revenge very seriously. She conducted extensive research, studying how criminal organizations work, their hierarchy, and the different roles people played in the mafia. This was necessary to use the correct terminology when communicating with Nathaniel. The betrayed fiancé also used a Bulgarian dictionary to translate some words into Bulgarian, making her threats as convincing as possible. The woman pulled off an enormous amount of work, all just to teach her boyfriend a lesson. In the messages Linda sent Nathaniel daily, all these fictional characters talked about their criminal activities, smuggling illegal substances from Mexico to the US, eliminating members of rival gangs, and hacking security systems, among other things. Over time, Paloma created complex backstories for each profile, weaving the characters' fates together in the most incredible ways to make them seem more believable. It was as if she was writing a blockbuster script meant to captivate a single viewer, Nathaniel Huey Jr. And all this was done solely to control every aspect of her unfaithful fiancé's life. Over time, the woman started giving her boyfriend tasks, which he carried out without question because he was genuinely scared. The man truly believed he was communicating with the Bulgarian mafia and the Mexican cartel. Deep down, he even felt proud of the honor bestowed upon him and dreamed of climbing higher up the career ladder. The catfishing went on for months, but let's not forget that the main goal of this whole scheme was to bring the unfaithful husband back to the family and permanently kill his desire to stray. The funniest part is that the correspondence often took place from different rooms of the same house, and Huey never even considered that it was all the work of his cunning fiancé. Linda was pleased that her plan and the time invested had paid off. Now she could control her husband's every move, and even through one member of the Mexican cartel, forbade Nathaniel from ever talking to other women except, of course, his fiancée. She wanted to scare her boyfriend so badly that he'd stop all his affairs and fully dedicate himself to Linda. But this is where Paloma miscalculated. Nathaniel believed in the mafia, but didn't stop communicating with other women. In 2023, Huey got a new job at an equipment warehouse for an engineering company. There, he met another employee named Zarita Bartholomew. The pair quickly grew close, and they started an affair. This affair changed everything, destroying the lives of several families. Zarita was 32, almost the same age as Nathaniel. The woman was married. She and her husband, Alberto Rolón, with whom she'd been for about 10 years, had 2 sons, 7-year-old Diego and 9-year-old Adriel. Alberto was described as a wonderful father who always put his children's well-being first. In recent years, there had been some problems in the couple's relationship. Zarita had cheated on her husband twice. She'd had affairs with 2 colleagues. This happened before she met Nathaniel. When Alberto found out, he didn't break up the family. The couple stayed together because the only thing that mattered to the man was his kids. He wanted to keep the family together for his sons. The husband simply ignored his wife's affairs as long as they didn't interfere with family life. At the same time, Zareta was a good mother, and Alberto was fine with the arrangement. Besides, both workplace affairs had ended by then. And now, it seemed, the family was quite happy until Zareta started a relationship with Nathaniel. The family idyll was shattered in May 2023. Zareta and Nathaniel fell in love very quickly. Bartholomew told her friends that Huey was her soulmate, that they were like Romeo and Juliet. The lovers exchanged romantic messages, and their texts weren't just about passion. Love was blossoming. This was especially evident on Zareta's side. Naturally, Linda, Nathaniel's fiancée, who was monitoring his correspondence, soon found out about the new affair. The woman kept tabs on everything her boyfriend did, so she became very worried when the fling started turning into something more. This wasn't just a fleeting infatuation or a casual hookup. Zareta and Nathaniel were talking about love. Linda was furious. What was the point of catfishing if the man kept cheating on her? But, calming down a bit, Paloma didn't confront him or act rashly. She decided to turn Nathaniel's life into a nightmare. From that moment, Linda's efforts to bring her husband back to the family intensified and crossed all boundaries. She activated all her fake accounts and began bombarding the man with messages from members of the Bulgarian mafia and the Mexican cartel. Her primary goal was to destroy the budding relationship between her husband and Zareta Bartholomew. Linda, posing as a mafioso, sent her husband a message saying that the gang members knew about his affair with another woman. They allegedly insisted that Huey end the relationship immediately. One mafia member was adamant that Nathaniel needed to focus on his wife and do everything to keep Linda from worrying. After messages like these, Huey was in a state of rage and indignation. Not only were mafia members meddling in his personal life and forbidding him from seeing other women, but they were also advising him to make love to Linda more often and try to please her. It sounds far-fetched, but at that moment, Nathaniel still didn't suspect that all these messages were written by his fiancée. It seemed he didn't care because he ignored the instructions and continued seeing Zoraida. So what did Linda do? She decided to go after the woman who had started an affair with her boyfriend. Now Paloma sent a message to Bartholomew, supposedly from a mafia representative, warning her that if Zoraida wanted to keep her affair a secret from her husband, she needed to break things off with Nathaniel immediately. Otherwise, their photo together would end up in Alberto's hands. But that wasn't the worst part. Linda threatened her rival with violence against her sons. The one thing Paloma didn't know was that Zoraida's husband was aware of her romantic escapades. They had something like a mutual agreement. Affairs on the side weren't supposed to affect family life or the kids, but Linda crossed a line by threatening innocent little boys. The messages from an unknown user posing as a gang member didn't scare Zoraida, they only made her angry. She demanded that her sons be left alone and that no one dare come near her family. After the failed attempt to blackmail Bartholomew, Linda turned to her husband, Alberto. Posing as the owner of one of her fake profiles, she told the man that his wife's lover was a member of the mafia and a very dangerous person, a hitman. By meeting with Nathaniel Huey, his wife, Zoraida, was putting Alberto's sons in danger. The man was confused. He didn't understand what was happening, who these people were trying to interfere in his family life, or what they wanted from him. But Linda didn't let up. She kept writing to Alberto, saying Huey was a dangerous person who always carried weapons and planned to harm his children. Linda accused Zoraida of inaction and insisted that Alberto intervene immediately. While Paloma schemed online posing as the mafia, Nathaniel and Zoraida continued seeing each other. In fact, their feelings grew stronger. The mistress complained that the affair was causing problems in her family and suggested they drop everything and run away together with Huey. Nathaniel supported the idea. When Linda saw this correspondence, she flew into a rage. The woman created a group chat, including Zoraida, Nathaniel, and Alberto, and escalated her threats. Now, she issued an ultimatum. If the affair didn't end, the mistress's entire family would be killed. She backed up her threats with emails, as if to show that Alberto and Zoraida were truly on the mafia's hook. The whole scam was taking on monstrous proportions. Alberto was horrified by the situation and worried about his children's safety. Apparently, the warnings had no effect on Bartholomew, because she continued seeing Huey. Alberto didn't want to argue with his wife unnecessarily, so he wrote a letter to Nathaniel, begging him to break things off with Zoraida. He told the lover that his wife would never leave her family, and for her, the affair was nothing more than entertainment. The betrayed husband informed Huey that Zoraida had had flings on the side before him, and they all ended quickly. At that moment, Nathaniel had a complete breakdown. It seems all these tricks, threats, and demands finally pushed him over the edge. He was genuinely afraid that he was being watched 24/7. The mafia members knew what he was doing, where he went, and what messages he sent to his mistress. The man was completely lost and didn't know what to do. Huey developed full-blown paranoia. He constantly looked over his shoulder, taped over the peephole on his door with black electrical tape, covered the camera on his phone, and got furious if anyone in the household forgot to lock the doors. To cope with the emotional stress, Nathaniel turned to illegal substances. He started regularly using a white powder, which didn't help the situation at all. His drug addiction made him even more paranoid. The man began to think he was losing his mind. On the morning of September 14th, 2023, Nathaniel received a message from the mafia saying there was a spy in his circle who was watching him and passing information to a rival gang. Moreover, they told him that this person was Zoraida Bartholomew. In reality, this was Linda's final attempt to turn Nathaniel against his mistress. Paloma saw that her boyfriend was becoming more withdrawn and wanted to convince him that Zoraida was working for the mafia and had started the affair with the sole purpose of spying. Hiding behind fake accounts, Linda secretly told her fiancé that they wanted to kill him. That's why they'd assigned a spy to him. The only way out was to act first. The constant pressure from all sides and his worsening paranoid state made Nathaniel believe this nonsense. He started piecing together details, and his inflamed mind actually found evidence that Zoraida was spying on him for the mafia. The man frantically searched for ways to get out of this horrific situation alive. A crazy idea came to him. He needed to not only get rid of his mistress, but destroy her entire family. Obviously, this idea didn't come out of nowhere. Linda had deliberately planted it in her boyfriend's head through catfishing. The situation is absurd to the point of impossibility. Even if we assume Nathaniel believed the Bulgarian mafia and Mexican cartel's messages about his mistress, what was the point of killing an entire family? How could Zoraida and Alberto's underage sons possibly harm him? But in Huey's mind, the idea of completely wiping out the entire family took firm hold. Reason was out of the question. Over the next few days, Nathaniel took sick leave from work. He stopped seeing his mistress and completely cut off communication with her. Now he spent all his time working with a mafia member to devise a plan to take out Zoraida and her family. Huey had no idea that he was actually discussing all the details with his live-in partner. So, Linda, aka the mafia member nicknamed Turtle, and Nathaniel mapped out the house where Bartholomew lived. They figured out the best way to get inside. They discussed escape routes, studied surveillance cameras in the area, and chose the most convenient time for the attack. The cartel member explained that after the massacre, they'd need to trash the house to make it look like a burglar had broken in and torn the place apart looking for valuables. That way, the police would think the attack was a failed robbery and never track down the culprit. Turtle also assured Nathaniel that countless similar cases go unsolved every year, and Huey had nothing to worry about because the crime syndicate would always have his back. After finalizing the plan's details, Nathaniel went to buy the equipment needed for the attack. He took Linda with him, not even suspecting that she was the one messaging him as Turtle. Paloma pretended she was clueless about all these preparations. The conspirators bought a high-quality pair of binoculars for surveillance and new, comfortable clothing that didn't yet have any DNA traces. Then the man prepared the necessary weapons and packed everything into a black duffel bag. It included a Glock 19 pistol, an AR-15 rifle, ammunition, a knife, a flashlight, rubber gloves, zip ties, and a gun cleaning kit. All this time, Zoraida kept sending Nathaniel tender love letters. She was confused and genuinely didn't understand why her lover wasn't responding. They hadn't fought before this, and everything seemed fine. Bartholomew didn't yet know that Huey considered her a spy and was preparing to carry out a massacre. Nathaniel, meanwhile, deliberately ignored his mistress's messages, suspecting her of every imaginable sin and believing she posed a threat to his life. His thoughts were entirely consumed by the upcoming showdown and executing the criminal plan. The situation escalated rapidly. On September 14, 2023, Huey learned that Zoraida was supposedly spying on him. By the early hours of September 17th, he was already on his way to carry out the deed. Linda continued to act like she was in the dark. At around 3 a.m., she drove her boyfriend to his mistress's residence in Romoville, Illinois. Nathaniel hesitated for a long time before getting out of the car. He carefully peered through the binoculars, surveying the surroundings. Then, at 3:40 a.m., he grabbed the bag with the weapons and quickly headed to the backyard. At that moment, Zoraida's entire family was peacefully asleep in the house, unaware of anything. The boys, Adriel and Diego, had fallen asleep next to their mom that evening. Nathaniel broke into the house through the back door, smashing a glass panel to make it look like a break-in. The noise woke Alberto. He went down to the kitchen to investigate the source of the strange sounds. That's when Nathaniel opened fire. Because Huey wasn't expecting the homeowner to appear in the kitchen, he missed and Alberto fled. The man ran toward the bedroom where his kids were, but the intruder caught up with him. Unfortunately, before Alberto could reach the door, Nathaniel overtook him and fired 5 quick shots. The homeowner collapsed in the hallway and died on the spot. Besides the people, there were 3 dogs in the house. Amid all the chaos, the animals woke up and started barking. They met the same fate as Alberto. But Huey didn't stop there. He reached Zoraida's bedroom but ran into an obstacle. The door was locked. The man tried to kick the door down, but he couldn't. Bartholomew and her 2 children had locked themselves in the bedroom after hearing the gunshots. She didn't know who had broken into their home, so she was crying and begging the intruder not to harm her boys and to spare their lives. She stood on the other side of the door, trying to appeal to the attacker's conscience. Nathaniel silently kept kicking the door, but the lock wouldn't budge. Huey even fell a few times, smashing through the drywall on the other side of the hallway. After another fall, the criminal got seriously angry. He aimed his pistol at the lock and fired several times. A bullet went through the door and hit Zoraida, fatally wounding her. After the woman collapsed to the floor, Nathaniel was finally able to break into the bedroom. In the bed were the 2 boys, Adriel and Diego. Their mother's screams and the chaos in the house had woken them up. They clung to each other, too scared to move. The boys had just witnessed their mother's death. They likely didn't fully grasp what had happened at that moment, but they wouldn't have time to process it. Adriel and Diego's fate was sealed. Nathaniel walked up to the bed and pulled the trigger twice, aiming the gun at the heads of Alberto and Zoraida's sons. In just half an hour, a family of 4 was completely wiped out. The main mastermind and organizer of the crimes, Linda Paloma, sat in the car the whole time, waiting for her fiancé to return. She was ready to do anything to stop Nathaniel from having affairs, even if it meant taking someone's life. But was she ready for what would happen next? Having finished off his mistress and her family, Nathaniel returned to the living room and trashed the place to make it look like a robbery. Then he spray-painted a message on the wall to add to the chaos. He went outside and got back into the car with Linda. The 2 drove home as if nothing terrible had happened. The next day, when Zoraida, Alberto, and their 2 children didn't show up for work or school, people got worried. The disappearance of an entire family, who also weren't answering phone calls, was reported to the authorities, and that evening, a check was conducted at the house. The scene inside, discovered by the police, was horrific. Blood was everywhere, furniture was overturned, and items were scattered throughout the house. The bodies of the married couple, 32-year-old Zoraida Bartholomew and 38-year-old Alberto Rolon, along with their underage sons, were found lifeless. The cause of death for all 4 was gunshot wounds. In addition to the homeowners, the bodies of 3 dead dogs were found in the house. The police immediately launched an investigation into the brutal attack. Investigators looking into the details of the massacre of 4 innocent victims first went to Zoraida and Alberto's workplace. Bartholomew's colleagues revealed that the woman had recently started an affair with another employee, Nathaniel Huey Jr., making the man an immediate person of interest for the detectives. Surprisingly, Linda was still running her fraudulent scheme, posing as a mafia member nicknamed Turtle in her messages. This was the person Nathaniel was supposed to report to about completing the job of eliminating the spy. When Huey described in detail what he'd done to his mistress's family, Turtle gave him some tips on how to destroy evidence. The police tracked down Nathaniel and questioned him about his relationship with Zoraida. The man didn't deny it and admitted they were indeed lovers. And Alberto, Zoraida's husband, had once even slashed the tires on Huey's car when he found out about his wife's new affair. Nathaniel didn't deny the romantic relationship with the victim, as the police would have found out about their connection anyway, and that would only have increased suspicion against him. Nathaniel also told the officers that his wife, Linda, though not officially his wife, just his fiancée, had no idea about his infidelity. It seems the man genuinely believed he'd kept his affair a secret from his wife and had no clue that she was the one orchestrating the entire massacre. When the detectives asked if he'd heard what happened to Zoraida, Huey said yes. He'd learned about it from the news. The investigators tried to convince him to cooperate and hand over his phone for analysis, and they also asked him to take a lie detector test. The man agreed, but didn't give up his phone, promising to do so later. For some reason, the officers didn't believe a word he said, but at that point, they didn't have any concrete evidence to arrest the suspect. The police decided to put Nathaniel under surveillance. Another group of investigators went to Linda's house and spoke with her. The woman claimed she and her husband had spent the night at home. He hadn't gone anywhere. Linda herself, while talking to the officers, came across as a pleasant person. It was hard to even imagine she was involved in anything shady. The detectives thought Paloma was an accidental victim of her boyfriend's unfortunate game. The next day, the police continued tailing Nathaniel. At one point, they noticed Huey transferring his weapons collection to another person's car. When they stopped him in a parking lot and asked again about the massacre of Zoraida's family, he cracked and started spouting nonsense about constant threats from a woman connected to the Bulgarian mafia. Nathaniel claimed it was their doing, but he had nothing to do with the family's death. Once again, the police let him go, as they still had nothing solid to pin on him. They decided to keep up the surveillance. Returning Des Moines that day, Nathaniel started losing it. He was convinced he'd be arrested for the massacre, that the police had already figured everything out. Linda calmed her fiancé down and went with him to see a lawyer. After talking with the attorney, Huey met with his mom and confessed everything to her. He told her he'd killed an entire family, but he hadn't done it of his own free will. It was on orders from the Mexican cartel and the Bulgarian mafia. The man cried and apologized to his mother for committing the crime and now having to flee. The police checked phone records and traffic camera footage. They traced the timeline and route of Nathaniel's trip from Linda's house to Zoraida and Alberto's house and back. So now they had something to charge the suspect with. But by the time they came to arrest him, Nathaniel wasn't at home. Plus, the police found out that Paloma hadn't shown up for work, and no one knew where she'd gone. The investigators thought the woman might have become another of Huey's victims, or that her life was in danger, so they issued a warrant for Nathaniel's arrest. Eventually, the detectives discovered that the two had fled the city. On September 20th, 2023, Huey Jr. and Paloma were spotted at a supermarket parking lot in Catoosa, Oklahoma. After the pair left the store, the Catoosa police were already waiting for them in the parking lot. Nathaniel and Linda looked very relaxed. It didn't seem like the woman was being held hostage. As soon as the couple saw the officers approaching, they jumped into their car and, speeding up, hit the local highway. A chase ensued. Nathaniel was behind the wheel, flooring the gas pedal. Law enforcement officers tried to keep up, and they were told over the radio that a hostage was currently in the car of a suspect in a serious crime, so they needed to do everything to keep her alive. The investigators still thought Linda was a potential victim. It seems Nathaniel soon lost control of the vehicle. The car started swerving, hit another vehicle, and then slammed full speed into the median barrier. After the collision, the car burst into flames instantly. Officers who rushed to the scene tried to pull the victims from the burning car, but it was already too late. Huey died in the driver's seat. Paloma was taken to the hospital in critical condition, but later passed away. During the high-speed chase, Nathaniel pulled out a gun, aimed it at Linda, and shot her in the head, then put the weapon to his own temple and pulled the trigger, killing himself. That's when the car lost control, crashed into another vehicle, and veered into the barrier. The crash caused the fire. When news of the accident reached Linda's friends and family, they were utterly devastated. Her kids kept saying what an amazing person their mom was and blamed Nathaniel for dragging her into his sinister plan. The media bought into this story too, portraying Paloma as yet another victim of a brutal crime that took an entire family. It was only months later, after the police conducted a thorough investigation, that it came to light that Linda was actually the mastermind and organizer of the attack on Zoraida and Alberto. Detectives discovered that Paloma had created an entire network of fake accounts, posing as members of the Bulgarian mafia and the Mexican cartel. It turned out this twisted deception scheme had been running for over a year. It started even before Zoraida came into the picture. According to the investigation materials, behind the deaths of a family of 4 was a couple from Streamwood, 30-year-old Nathaniel Huey Jr. and his 50-year-old fiancée, Ermelinda Paloma. Huey Jr. thought he was carrying out a mafia hit, but in reality his own fiancée was pulling the strings, manipulating him to put an end to his romantic relationship with her rival. It was she who sent Nathaniel instructions on how to kill Zoraida and her loved ones. When the ugly truth came out, everyone was shocked at how far a betrayed woman could go. Since both suspects were already dead by then, there was no trial, and the case was closed. It's believed that Nathaniel never knew about Linda's involvement until the very end. There's a chance that during the chase, the woman confessed her role in the operation, which is why he pulled out the gun and shot his fiancée. Or maybe Huey had simply lost his mind completely and turned the weapon on Linda and then himself. But these are just guesses and speculation. What really happened, we can only imagine. The most horrific part is that an innocent family got caught in this web of deception. 2 young children lost their lives because of Linda Paloma's deceitful scheme. Alberto and Zoraida were described as kind and caring people who worked hard for their children's well-being. There were some misunderstandings between them, but they had recently bought a new family home and were ready to put up with each other's flaws for the sake of their 2 wonderful sons' future. Adriel and Diego, 2 innocent angels with their whole lives ahead of them, were taken far too soon. Today's case exposed one of the most insane fraud schemes you've ever come across. This story is absurd to the point of impossibility. Some might even say it couldn't happen. But the tragic end of a once-loving couple speaks for itself. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video. There's enough simplicity for every wise man. Sometimes criminals, thinking they're the smartest and capable of planning several steps ahead, overlook the most basic details. It's these simple things that help solve complex cases. Today we'll travel back to the pre-dawn hours of March 2nd, 2010. In the city of Darien, near Chicago, Illinois, a shooting took place in one of the most ordinary homes. The 911 emergency service received a call from a woman hiding in a closet. Robbers had broken into the house, and the entire family was in danger. But who it was, how they did it, and what their motives were remained unknown. The small town of Darien, with a population of about 22,000 at the time, is a suburb of Chicago and ranks in the top 15 best places to live in the county. But this story isn't mentioned in tourist brochures. It all began on March 2nd, 2010. The silence of the night was shattered by a loud, sharp sound, after which, at 3:10 a.m., the Darien Police Department received an alarming call. It was a 25-year-old young woman hiding in a closet in her home. She whispered that someone had broken into their residence in the middle of the night and opened fire. About 10 shots rang out in different rooms. The caller was panicking because the criminals seemed to still be in the house. This young woman was Angela Kramer, and she was calling from her parents' home, where she had spent her entire life. Poor Angela knew that her other loved ones had already been shot and had no doubt that the same fate awaited her. It was a calm, quiet neighborhood, and, by all accounts, the Kramer family fit perfectly into the area where they lived. The owners of a large, beautiful home had never had any trouble with the law, were polite and friendly with their neighbors. A few minutes after the call to the emergency service, police arrived at the scene. The first thing they saw when they pulled up was a young man climbing out of a basement window. At first, his behavior raised suspicion, but it soon became clear that this was Anthony Kramer, Angela's older brother. He had been sleeping in a room on the basement level, and upon hearing gunshots in the house, tried to escape outside. Anthony and Angela were the only survivors that night, and both were in extreme shock from what had happened. The Kramer family consisted of the married couple Jeffrey and Lori and their 3 children, 29-year-old Anthony, 25-year-old Angela, and 20-year-old Michael. The Kramer family was highly respected in the community. Jeffrey ran his own auto repair company, while Lori worked at the McGraw-Hill publishing house, was an avid gardener and loved animals. By 2010, the couple had been married for 30 years. Their youngest son, Michael, had recently enrolled in a technical institute and planned to follow in his father's footsteps. All family members were ardent baseball fans, and their home was always known for its generosity and hospitality. But now, 3 of its residents were dead. When law enforcement officers entered the house, they discovered that Jeffrey, Lori, and Michael had been shot. The police entered through the front porch. On the first floor, right by the front door, they found the lifeless body of the family's patriarch, 50-year-old Jeffrey. His wife, 48-year-old Lori, lay right on the staircase, and inside, near the garage exit, lay Michael. All 3 showed no signs of life, each having been shot multiple times in the head. Apparently, whoever did this wanted to ensure the victims wouldn't survive. By that time, the perpetrator was no longer in the house, but Angela was still hiding in the closet where the police found her. Officers asked the young woman to close her eyes and carefully led her out of the house, as she shouldn't see her loved ones in such a state. While several police officers were cordoning off the horrific crime scene outside, a girl ran up to them and said she had also been in the house. It was the girlfriend of the deceased Michael. That night, she had stayed over at the Kramers. That evening, she and Michael had fallen asleep on the couch in front of the TV and woke up when someone broke into the house. When her boyfriend got into a fight with the intruder, the girl realized she couldn't help. She managed to escape unnoticed. She was the only witness able to provide a description of the attacker. According to the girl, it was a man dressed head to toe in black. Judging by the shattered window, he had entered the house that way. The hammer used to break the glass was lying right there on the floor. The stranger didn't hide as he boldly entered the house without hesitation. He smashed a window in the living room where Michael and his girlfriend were dozing on the couch at the time. During the fight with Michael, the man fired several shots. Jeffrey and Lori, who were upstairs, heard the noise and rushed downstairs. Judging by the position of the bodies, the father drew the fire to himself. The wounded Michael tried to escape and crawled toward the garage, but he was stopped by a bullet. Terrified, Lori didn't even make it down the stairs before several shots struck her. Several .40 caliber shell casings were scattered on the floor. There were bullet entry holes in the walls. Footprints were found in the snow in the backyard, leading to a neighboring property. The tracks led detectives to the main street and then disappeared. Nothing valuable was missing from the house, so it was unlikely a failed robbery. The attack seemed more like a targeted execution of the Kramer household. When the surviving family members were asked if they knew anyone among their acquaintances who might wish them harm, Anthony, not understanding, shook his head. He had no ideas. Angela suggested the only possibility: the father of her child. The thing was, they had broken up just a couple of months earlier, after Christmas, and the breakup hadn't gone as smoothly as she would have liked. The woman explained that her ex had anger issues. When he lost his temper, he could do very bad things. During those times, she tried to stay out of his sight to avoid provoking him further. Angela named him Johnny Borisov. She didn't claim he was capable of such a despicable act, but at the same time, no one else came to mind. Johnny was friends with Angela's previous boyfriend, a guy named Steve. That's how they met. Steve unfortunately died in a motorcycle accident. During that difficult time for the girl, Johnny was there for her. The young couple dated for about 2 years, and in 2009 they had a son. They lived together, but after the child was born, Johnny started treating his girlfriend possessively and got jealous over nothing. He tried in every way to isolate Angela, even from her family. Neither she nor her parents liked this. The Kramers were close with their family, and when Johnny forbade them from seeing each other, serious problems arose in the relationship, which only grew worse. About a year before the invasion of the Kramer home, Johnny held a knife to Jeffrey's throat and said he would take his life. A month after that incident, Borisov got into a fight with Lori because he wasn't invited to their son's birthday party. Angela said Johnny had threatened her family multiple times, especially in the last few months of their relationship. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and moved out. That's when the custody issues began. The child's father refused to pay child support and wanted full custody of their son. On the night of the attack, the baby was at Johnny's parents' house. The police immediately took an interest in Borisov's profile. However, before the detectives could summon him for questioning, he called the station himself. Johnny saw on the news that an attack had been made on the residence of his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child. The man was well aware that he would be the prime suspect in the attack, so he didn't wait to be called in for questioning and voluntarily showed up at the police station to talk to the detectives. Borisov knew he'd have to clear his name and was extremely unhappy with the situation. Johnny was very nervous and assured the officers he hadn't done anything wrong. He came in on his own because he knew suspicion would immediately fall on him. The man was worried, but upon learning that Angela was okay, he sighed with relief. In fact, it turned out that Borisov had an ironclad alibi. Surveillance camera footage confirmed that he was at a casino all night until 4 a.m. The shooting occurred at 3 a.m., and Johnny couldn't possibly have been in two places at once. Since this man was the only suspect with an obvious motive, they took his cell phone to check if he could somehow be involved in the shooting at the Kramer house. That night, several calls from a burner phone came to Borisov's phone, along with one voicemail from a guy who introduced himself as Jake. The stranger claimed he was being chased by several black SUVs and would soon have to ditch the phone. Friends, please support these videos with your activity. Subscribe to the channel, put a like on this video, and write a comment when you watch the video. Your activity is very valuable. Thank you. Then a man called 911 and reported that his former roommate, 23-year-old Jacob Nodors, had acted very strangely during a phone conversation and mentioned something about crimes. Jake had called his neighbor to say goodbye, as he thought they might be speaking for the last time. He claimed cops were chasing him, and they could open fire at any moment. The guy was clearly losing his mind. The man explained to the police that Jacob Nodors had been in a deep depression lately, and if something truly terrible had happened to him, he might not have been able to cope. It also came to light that Jake and the deceased Michael Kramer had been good friends, part of the same group, until they had a falling out a few months earlier. The reason for the argument was that Michael found out Jacob was getting along well with Johnny Borisov, whom Kramer couldn't stand because of his attacks on his family. Investigators began looking into Jacob Nodors's background. Since the person who called Borisov on the night of the attack also introduced himself as Jake, they learned that the guy's problems started back in childhood. His parents were very strict religious fanatics, not in the conventional sense, and didn't allow their son to interact with other people. If he dared to disobey, he got the full brunt of punishment from both his father and mother. To cope with his problems, Jake started using alcohol and illegal drugs. The guy couldn't stay in his religious family any longer and, at 18, moved in with his grandparents. But his life continued to spiral downward. Two of his friends, with whom he hung out in the same group, had recently died of overdoses, and he caught his girlfriend in the arms of a third friend, after which he cut ties with both of them and was in a poor mental state at the time. Jake met Johnny Borisov when he bought psychoactive drugs from him. The man whispered to him that he was part of a major drug trafficking gang and they were very serious people. To Jacob, meeting Johnny seemed like a chance to join the powerful elite, but he didn't know that his friendship with Borisov would ruin his relationship with his best friend, Michael Kramer. The police took an interest in the complex connections between Jacob Nodors, Johnny Borisov, and Michael Kramer, and decided to talk to Jake to clarify the situation. The guy had no criminal record, but he had attempted suicide several times. Detectives tried calling his burner phone, but when no one answered, they reached out to Jake's grandparents. The elderly couple was certain their grandson had nothing to do with the crime, describing him as a quiet person with gentle manners. Jake was an auto mechanic by trade and did have mental health issues, but was he capable of committing a crime? After checking several databases, investigators discovered that Nodors had bought a .40 caliber Glock pistol. This happened just a few days before the shooting at a sporting goods store located 20 minutes from the Kramer home. Apparently, Jake had decided to flee the city for some reason. The police had to call in federal marshals for assistance. A warrant was obtained for a search and to track the mobile phone linked to the burner number. It became clear that the guy was heading south to Florida. Jacob's parents lived there. Nodors was driving south, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Tears streamed down his pale face. In the rearview mirror, Jake kept seeing flashes of blue and red. He was waiting for the police to demand he pull over, but it never happened. While speeding down a dusty road toward his parents' house, Nodors even called 911 and reported that he was being chased. Apparently, paranoia had completely overtaken Jake. Detectives contacted the Florida Police Department and informed them that the suspect was heading their way. On March 3, 2010, the day after the shooting at the Kramer home, state law enforcement and federal marshals arrived at Nodors's parents' house. Jake was peacefully sleeping in a van parked near his parents' home. They took him, still groggy, into custody on suspicion of armed assault. No gun was found on him. Jake had spent the entire night driving. To calm himself, he took illegal substances that triggered hallucinations. That's why he kept seeing police car lights and sirens. It seemed to him that several black SUVs were chasing him. He knew he had committed a bloody crime, taking the lives of 3 innocent people, and now he felt fear and horror at the situation he was in. During questioning at the police station, Jacob was extremely nervous. He didn't say a word about the attack on the Kramer home. Instead, he kept repeating that he and his family were in danger. Only when the detectives managed to convince the guy that they could protect the Nodors family, and that if he told them the truth, Jake started talking. In his mind, the deaths of the people in that house were his only way to stay alive and save his family. Johnny Borisov and Jacob Nodors became friends in the summer of 2009. They spent a lot of time together. The man even gave the guy a place to stay when he was kicked out of a rental apartment. Sometimes they stopped by bars together, where Borisov met with his friends. Jake saw what kind of people they were. He respected his older friend, and at the same time, was very afraid because of his ties to the criminal world. In recent months, Johnny had been fighting with his ex-girlfriend over custody of their child. He wanted nothing to do with her family, but most of all, Borisov was worried that Angela Kramer knew too much about the gang members and their activities. He told Jake that the woman had threatened to go to the police, so they needed to silence her. Jacob believed everything Johnny told him, but he still didn't understand what he was being pushed toward. When Borisov said the guy would have to eliminate people who were a problem for them, and that if he refused, his own family would suffer, Jake agreed without hesitation. He knew Johnny and his gangster friends could easily carry out their threats. The only way to protect himself and his loved ones was to commit the crime. Borisov also reassured the guy by saying that on the appointed date, there would be several attacks on people who posed a threat to the drug trafficking gang, and he had a chance to prove himself and save his family. But, as it turned out later, no other attacks happened in the city. This suggests that Borisov simply used the naive guy for his nefarious purposes. In reality, there was no gang. Johnny was just a small-time, unsuccessful dealer. He skillfully manipulated a young man with mental health issues and a dependency on illegal substances. A few days before the massacre, Johnny told Jacob to buy a gun. Then he drew a layout of the Kramer house and explained the best way to break in. A specific date was set, March 2 at 3 a.m. For courage, Nodors took several pills and headed to Angela's house. He smashed a living room window with a hammer and saw Michael and his girlfriend on the couch. Jacob didn't dare shoot his friend right away, but Michael lunged at him with his fists. A fight broke out. Jake was afraid his identity would be revealed and fired. The noise woke the parents. Jeffrey and Lori came down the stairs, and Jacob started shooting at them. He just panicked. After dealing with the parents, Nodors caught up with the wounded Michael and finished him off with a shot to the head. Then he fired a couple of control shots into Jeffrey and Lori's heads. Johnny had initially told Jacob to search the entire house, including the bedrooms, but the guy was terrified that the police would catch him. So he quickly ran through the house and didn't find anyone else. Angela was hiding in the closet, and Anthony was sleeping in a room on the basement level, which the intruder didn't even think to check. After carrying out the massacre, Jacob fled through the backyard to his car, parked nearby, and drove to Florida. During questioning, Nodor said he threw the murder weapon into a dumpster near a restaurant. Later, the gun and some blood-stained clothing belonging to the victims were found there. The firearm matched the shell casings found in the house. On March 5th, Jacob was extradited back to Illinois. He was placed in a cell next to Johnny's. Listening devices had been installed in both cells beforehand. Unaware, Johnny began threatening Jake and inadvertently confirmed the entire story he had told. On March 6th, Borisov was officially charged with the massacre. In 2011, Jacob Nodors pleaded guilty to the armed assault on the Kramer family and accused Borisov of orchestrating the attack to get revenge on Angela Kramer, with whom he was embroiled in a bitter custody battle over their young son. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. In 2013, Johnny Borisov stood trial. His lawyers tried to portray the witness and perpetrator of the massacre, Jacob, as a mentally unstable person and pin all the blame on him, but the jury didn't buy it. They found Johnny guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After breaking up with the mother of his child, Johnny was firmly convinced that the entire family, including Angela, had to die. He secured an alibi for himself, persuaded a mentally unstable person to carry out the massacre, thinking he could escape punishment. And now he's forced to rot in prison for the rest of his days. Borisov's mother doesn't believe her son is capable of such brutality. The woman participates in various projects, advocating for her son's freedom. She complains to the public that Johnny suffers from severe diabetes, kidney disease, and congestive heart failure. And with such conditions, he's forced to remain in a prison cell. But it's hard to believe there's a heart in a man who wished to send an entire family to their deaths for his own whim. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video. The most precious thing on earth is life, but it's like a thin thread that can snap at any moment. Due to her age, 18-year-old Sophia hadn't even thought about this yet. $220. That's the amount a criminal valued her life at. It was a typical teenage girl's bedroom. A comfortable bed with a soft mattress and lots of pillows, posters of favorite musicians on the walls, a photo of the room's owner hugging her friends. On the bookshelves, a bunch of trinkets, little angels, stuffed toys, a small bouquet of dried flowers, a closet stuffed with all sorts of clothes. Only a bright red dress was missing. This bedroom remained untouched for 2 years after Sophia's tragic death. Lourdes kept the room exactly as it was when her daughter was alive. When the mother went into dust, for a moment, it felt like her girl would soon return from school and the whole nightmare would dissipate. But sadly, that would never happen. Sofia Martinez was born on September 28, 1981, to Lourdes and Juan. She was the middle of 3 sisters. The Martinez family lived in El Paso, Texas, a city bordering Mexico. Sofia's mother, Lourdes, had come to America in search of a better life. She worked hard to create a stable and loving environment for her future children. Sophia had a very strong bond with her mother and sisters. Her older sister was a constant role model, while her younger sister, Mary Ann, was her best friend. Over time, her parents' relationship changed, and they divorced. Lourdes met a man named Eladio Lisario, married him, and soon Sophia gained 2 younger brothers. By then, her older sister had also married and lived nearby. Sophia was 14 when her first brother was born. She attended high school. The girl loved coming back to a house filled with children's laughter. She'd open the door and shout, "Where are my babies?" Her brothers and nephews would rush to her, jumping into her arms and listening to her usual school stories. This daily interaction with loved ones made Sophia feel a deep connection with her family and brought her immense happiness. She cherished these moments above all else. The girl adored her family. The lively, love-filled home gave her a sense of safety and comfort. Lourdes was more than just a mother to Sophia. She was her confidant. Sophia shared secrets, dreams, and worries with her mom, knowing Lourdes would always listen patiently, offer support, and give wise advice. In 2000, Sophia was finishing high school. She had been working part-time at a local mall for a while, and the job allowed her to buy what she wanted: clothes, jewelry, makeup. But, like a typical teenager, Sophia dreamed of owning her own car. By her 18th birthday, she had saved enough money to buy a sporty, bright red Pontiac. It wasn't just a means of transportation. The car was a reflection of the girl's independence and a personal achievement. Sophia loved cruising around town in her red car. She took meticulous care of it, keeping the interior and windows spotless. She wanted the car to stay in good condition for as long as possible. She loved driving to classes with the sunroof open, letting the wind tousle her hair. Only a few months remained until high school graduation. Sophia eagerly awaited prom night. She and her classmates had already taken photos for the yearbook, and with each passing day, they felt the approach of a new chapter in their lives. Sophia planned to enroll at the University of Texas at El Paso to become a history teacher. Teaching wasn't just a job for her. It was her calling, a way for the girl to make the world a better place. Determined and ambitious, Sophia was already saving money to pay for college herself. In her free time, the future student hung out with friends. She didn't have a steady boyfriend yet, but she enjoyed going on dates. One of Sophia's co-workers decided to set her up with a friend. It was supposed to be a blind date. The young man suggested they meet as a trio at a popular nightclub in El Paso. In reality, the venue was known among the LGBTQ community, but it was one of the few places Sophia could get into, considering she wasn't yet 21. The club had a special area for visitors 18 and older, so Sophia agreed to the blind date, scheduled for Friday, March 10th, 2000. The upcoming meeting meant a lot to her because she had long dreamed of having a steady boyfriend. Sophia carefully chose the outfit she'd wear to impress the guy, styled her hair, applied makeup, then wiped it off and started over, thinking her eyeliner wasn't quite even. That evening, Sophia wanted to shine. Her mom, Lourdes, and younger sister, Mary Ann, shared her excitement. Sophia tried on dresses, showing them to her mom and sister, and listening to their comments. Then she'd change again, finding some flaw in herself. In the end, they unanimously chose a beautiful, bright red dress. Sophia looked stunning in it. She wished her younger brothers good night, kissed her mom and sister goodbye, and happily ran out the front door to her red Pontiac. Mary Ann and Lourdes watched from the window as the car pulled out of the driveway, unaware that they were seeing Sophia for the last time. Friends, please support these videos with your activity. Subscribe to the channel, put a like on this video, and write a comment when you watch the video. Your activity is very valuable. Thank you. Her parents weren't too worried about their daughter because she always came home as soon as the clubs closed for the night. Lourdes knew Sophia was meeting a co-worker who was supposed to introduce her to a friend. The next morning, Saturday, March 11th, when Mary Ann peeked into her sister's bedroom, she saw the bed was empty, the sheets untouched. The girl immediately told her mom. It meant Sophia still hadn't returned from her date. That was strange. Around 11 a.m., Sophia's employer from the mall called and said she hadn't shown up for her shift. Since this was unlike her daughter, Lourdes began to worry. She contacted Sophia's friends and classmates and called local hospitals, thinking her daughter might have been in a car accident. But no one had heard anything about the girl. Finally, the woman dialed the El Paso Police Department and reported her daughter missing. Lourdes described the car, the clothes, gave physical characteristics, and noted the time, 10:15 p.m., when they last saw Sophia the previous evening. The El Paso police didn't yet know that earlier that day, around noon, law enforcement officers in New Mexico had stumbled upon a disturbing scene in the desert. About 100 meters from the road stood a brand new red Pontiac. The passenger side window had a crack, likely from a gunshot, and there were blood-like stains inside. This raised concerns that the car might be a crime scene. The police towed the vehicle to the New Mexico State Forensic Lab for thorough processing. So, the two agencies hadn't yet connected the missing schoolgirl with her car. Using the license plate, officers determined the car was registered to Lourdes Lasario. Only after calling the woman did they learn that her 18-year-old daughter, now considered missing, drove the red Pontiac. After the police call, Lourdes immediately realized something terrible had happened to Sophia. Her daughter valued her car too much to abandon it somewhere. The New Mexico State Police contacted the El Paso police. They shared information, as both agencies now suspected the girl might have been a victim of a crime. But, unfortunately, they had no solid leads yet. However, on Sunday, March 12th, a pair of teenagers made a horrifying discovery in the El Paso desert. The high schoolers were walking on the city's outskirts when they noticed something bright about 100 meters from the road. It was the body of a young woman in a red dress. She was lying face up, but her face was barely recognizable. The victim's remains were about 10 miles from the area where the red Pontiac was found. The police called to the scene, despite finding no wallet, purse, or documents with the girl, immediately suspected it was 18-year-old Sophia Martinez. At first glance, it was clear the schoolgirl's death was violent. Her nylon stockings were torn, her dress soaked in blood mixed with wet sand. Upon closer inspection, detectives noticed obvious bruises on the inner thighs of the victim, as well as severe injuries to her face and head. Near the body was a shoe print, possibly left by the perpetrator, and a .22 caliber bullet lay nearby on the ground. Now the officers faced the difficult task of notifying Sophia's parents. The family gathered at their home. When one of the officers said they had found Miss Martinez, Lourdes, with hope in her voice, asked if her daughter was okay. Hearing the bitter words that Sophia had passed away and her body was found in the desert on the city's outskirts, the mother's heart shattered into a million pieces. That's how she felt at that moment. The relatives simply couldn't believe this had really happened to Sophia. They hoped it might be a mistake, that they had found another girl who just matched the description, but the officer's question caught them off guard. The investigators asked if Sophia had a child and showed a photo of a little boy, which they said was found in the left cup of the victim's bra. The photo, as it turned out, showed one of Sophia's younger brothers. The high schooler did keep pictures of the boys in her purse, but why one ended up on her chest was unclear. What made the girl hide the photo in her bra? That question now intrigued the detectives. The news that Sophia was no longer alive felt like a waking nightmare to Lourdes. She kept thinking she'd wake up any moment, and it would all be just a bad dream. She'd go up to her daughter's bedroom and see her alive and unharmed, but sadly, her nightmare was real. Meanwhile, the detectives focused on piecing together any details that could shed light on what happened that fateful evening. After talking to the family, they learned Sophia was headed to a blind date. Soon, they identified the name of the guy who was supposed to meet her at the club that night. The young man explained that a friend had promised to introduce him to Sophia. They waited for the girl at a cafe, but she never showed up. Just to be safe, the detectives thoroughly searched the guy's car, compared the size and shape of his shoes to the footprints near Sophia's body, and took a DNA sample in case it was needed. The young man even agreed to take a polygraph test to confirm his version of events. His story checked out completely. Sophia Martinez's autopsy revealed she died from brain injuries caused by multiple gunshot wounds to the face and head. She was shot 5 times. The medical examiner recovered only 4 bullets. One, apparently, went through and through. That was the one found nearby in the sand. It was also determined that Sophia had been sexually assaulted before her death. Swabs were taken from her body. The examination managed to extract DNA from the seminal fluid, presumed to belong to the perpetrator. The toxicology report for drugs or alcohol in the victim's blood came back negative. Sophia was completely sober when she was attacked. On March 17, 2000, a memorial service was held at the high school where the deceased student had studied, attended by about 300 people. Her younger sister, Mary Ann, gave a heartfelt speech in Sophia's memory. Sophia's last photo, meant for the graduation yearbook, was placed next to her casket. This was not at all how the young schoolgirl's fate was supposed to unfold. Sophia's mother, Lourdes, had to face a harsh reality. Her daughter was gone, and the criminal was still at large. The victim's loved ones desperately needed answers. They were consumed by fear and anxiety that someone else could be hurt. They didn't want other families to endure the same pain. Unfortunately, the detectives had found nothing at that point to steer the investigation in the right direction. This terrified Sophia's family because the keys to the Pontiac were never found, and those keys were on the same ring as the house keys. The perpetrator clearly knew the address, as he had rummaged through Sophia's purse and seen her wallet and ID with the address. During a thorough search of Sophia's car, a receipt dated March 10th, the evening Sophia disappeared, was found on the floor. It was a slip from an ATM located just a few minutes' drive from the girl's home in El Paso. The high schooler passed by that bank every day on her way to school. The bank was used by her entire family and many local residents. The timestamp on the receipt showed Sophia withdrew money at 10:23 p.m. This was crucial because ATMs had built-in surveillance cameras that recorded every transaction for customer safety. There were also additional cameras on the surrounding property. When the detectives reviewed the footage from that evening, they were in complete shock. What the officers saw on those recordings was simply unimaginable. The attack that took place right in front of the ATM was so brazen and aggressive. The crime was captured from multiple angles. It unfolded in the following sequence. At 10:22 p.m., the cameras showed Sophia's red Pontiac pulling up to the ATM. The girl stopped and lowered the driver's side window. At 10:23 p.m., Sophia entered her card's PIN and withdrew $120 from her account. She took the receipt, and the camera captured her happy smile. It was clear the schoolgirl was alone in the car. After putting the cash in her wallet, Sophia buckled her seatbelt, pulled out her lipstick, touched up her lips in the mirror, and then fixed her hair. She wanted to look perfect for her date. At that point, she had about a 10-minute drive to the club. But 2 minutes after Sophia pulled up to the ATM, and before she could drive off, the investigators saw a chilling scene. At 10:24 p.m., a man dressed all in black appeared on the footage. He approached the car from behind, and Sophia didn't notice him. In a second, the stranger rushed to the driver's side door and, pointing a gun through the open window, pulled the trigger. The criminal didn't even speak to the girl. He just walked up and shot her in the head. Based on Sophia's injuries, the bullet grazed her cheek, nicked her nose, and hit the passenger side window. The surveillance camera caught the flash of the gunshot, and the car's window cracked. It all happened in mere seconds. As the girl grabbed her face, trying to stop the blood and comprehend what was happening, the man yanked the rear door handle and got into the Pontiac behind the driver. Sophia didn't die from this injury. Just a few seconds later, pressing a tissue to her face, the girl made a second withdrawal at the ATM. This time, the amount was $200. The saddest part was that Sophia's bank account had only about $250. The criminal ruthlessly forced her to withdraw those $200, which she had worked so hard to earn, and surely the girl would have gladly given them up if the man hadn't shot her. At 10:25 p.m., the car left the bank's premises. Sophia, wounded, was driving, with the perpetrator behind her. Where they were headed is unknown. What's clear is that afterward, the girl was sexually assaulted and shot dead, and her red Pontiac was abandoned elsewhere. The investigators wondered, who was this guy? Did Sophia know him? Was Sophia specifically targeted, or was it random? They uploaded the DNA sample obtained from the autopsy to the CODIS database, but there were no matches. The attacker's DNA wasn't in the criminal database. All they had at that point was a grainy, low-quality image from the ATM's surveillance cameras. Through the media, the police released a description of the suspect: a white male, slim build, about 5'8", tall, possibly with facial hair. The investigators had to publicize the ATM surveillance footage. The authorities appealed to the public to contact the police if anyone recognized the man. They then held a press conference explaining to the public what had happened to Sofia Martinez and issuing warnings about the potential risks and dangers of using ATMs. They emphasized that, for their safety, citizens should keep their car engines running and windows and doors locked to leave quickly after getting cash from an ATM. Their warnings made sense, but unfortunately, they didn't save Sofia. The attack on her happened in seconds. Sofia didn't even have time to process what was happening. All this news only fueled more panic and fear in El Paso. Residents worried that the criminal was staking out ATMs, looking for random people to attack next. At the bank where Sofia withdrew cash, brighter lighting was installed to deter criminals, and additional surveillance cameras were added. But that likely wouldn't have changed the plans of someone intent on committing a robbery. After the detectives released the image of Sofia's suspected abductor, various tips started coming in to the police. One was from a passerby who found another woman's driver's license near the spot where Sofia's body was discovered. Fortunately, the license's owner had escaped her situation alive. She told officers her purse was stolen at the local mall, where the deceased high schooler worked. The woman whose purse was stolen had no idea how her documents ended up in the desert. It was assumed the thief discarded them after taking everything valuable from the wallet. As soon as the media began spreading the story about the abductor, the man responsible for the purse theft turned himself in to the police and confessed to the stealing. He was terrified that the detectives would eventually track him down, and worse, they might pin the murder on him. The thief voluntarily provided his DNA samples, and suspicions regarding Sofia were cleared. Time passed, months went by, but no new leads emerged in the case. Then, in July 2000, a series of violent carjackings occurred around El Paso. Criminals would shoot at car windows to force drivers to abandon their vehicles and flee. One of the affected motorists was able to identify the attacker. The perpetrator was arrested and quickly gave up his accomplice. It looked promising. The men were questioned, and their DNA was taken, but the DNA didn't match. By then, the detectives had given up hope. Everyone thought the attack on Sofia would remain unsolved. The criminal could have come to El Paso from Mexico and escaped there. No new information came in about the case. Sofia's younger sister, Mary Ann, was only 16 when the tragedy struck. For months, she was haunted by nightmares. In her dreams, Sofia sometimes appeared but said nothing. Then the schoolgirl started thinking she saw her sister on the street among passers-by. She knew it couldn't be true, but desperately believed in the impossible. The older sister, Dulcie, could no longer stand seeing ads for evening dresses because every time she wondered what dress Sofia would have chosen. The deceased high schooler's friends were no longer excited about the upcoming prom. They knew Sofia couldn't celebrate with them, and it made them sad. Sofia's family did everything possible to keep their daughter and sister's case from being shelved. They ordered red ribbons in the color of the victim's dress and hung them everywhere. They wore them themselves and handed them out to strangers so people wouldn't forget that justice for Sofia had not been served. The FBI joined the investigation. The El Paso Police Department's Crimes Against Persons unit assigned 8 detectives to work specifically on Sofia's case. The El Paso Crime Stoppers offered a $11,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. A local radio station that Sofia loved launched a fundraising campaign. They collected over $27,000. Ordinary citizens donated part of their money to support the schoolgirl's investigation. One 4-year-old boy broke his piggy bank and asked his parents to give his small savings to the reward fund. Many people came together to catch the person who had harmed an innocent girl. A film crew from the popular TV show America's Most Wanted even came to El Paso to shoot a segment about Sofia Martinez's murder and give the crime more publicity. Despite the reward amount growing rapidly, no new leads emerged in the investigation. When the detectives working on Sofia's case had all but lost hope, they unexpectedly received information that led to the capture of the criminal. A woman contacted them, claiming she knew who had taken Sofia's life. One stranger insisted on receiving the promised $51,000 reward. Of course, she wasn't the first to make such claims, but this time the information was truly explosive. The young woman who approached the police was only 20 years old. Her name was Heather Pavoke. She said that, of course, she was primarily interested in the reward, but then, so as not to seem completely heartless, added that she was having nightmares because of the whole situation. According to Heather, the attacker was already behind bars for another crime, so she felt safe enough to tell the police what she knew. The criminal was her husband, Michael Jacques. As proof, Heather handed the detectives Sofia's driver's license, half-burned. On September 30th, 2000, more than 7 months after Sofia's murder, the woman wrote a 5-page statement detailing what had happened to the girl. It all started back in March when Heather was hospitalized with a kidney infection. On the evening of March 10th, her husband, Michael Jacques, and his best friend, William Joseph Berkeley, were in her hospital room. William had been living with her, Michael, and their 2 children since January 2000. During the men's conversation, she overheard them saying they wanted to make some quick money. Heather assumed the friends were planning to sell drugs, something they had done before. Before leaving, her husband stole a box of latex gloves from the hospital. That evening, he returned to Heather's hospital room and told her that he and William had robbed someone at an ATM. Berkeley hid in the bushes, while Michael waited for him in his car in a parking lot across the street. Jacques saw a red car pull up to the ATM. Berkeley jumped out of the bushes and, threatening the driver with a gun, forced them to get out of the car. He then got behind the wheel and drove off in an unknown direction. Michael tried to follow the red car but couldn't catch up. In reality, things didn't happen that way, and the officers knew it. They knew Sofia never got out of her car, but it seemed someone was lying, either Michael to his wife or Berkeley to his friend. Heather then explained that she and her husband were in her hospital room when, around midnight, a nurse came in and told Michael someone was waiting for him downstairs. It was William Berkeley. He told his friend he needed to get rid of the car he had stolen to cover up the crime. The men planned to drive the car to the desert near the Mexican border and burn it. According to Heather's husband, it was a brand new Pontiac. The next day, March 11th, Heather was discharged from the hospital and returned home. That evening, they were grilling steaks. Heather approached Berkeley and asked him to tell her what had happened the day before and whether the driver had seen the attackers' faces, as they could remember them and go to the police. William pulled a driver's license from his pocket and handed it to Heather. It was a license issued to Sofia Martinez, with a photo of a schoolgirl, judging by her age. According to Berkeley, he took the documents to find out where the girl lived. If she filed a report against him, he could track her down and threaten her. After that, the man tossed Sofia's driver's license into the grill and watched it melt. The rest of the evening passed as usual, as if nothing terrible had happened. The friends had a good time, ate meat, and laughed. When, a few days later, the news reported not only Sofia Martinez's abduction and robbery, but also that she had been killed, Heather recalled the photo on the driver's license and put 2 and 2 together. She had a breakdown and tried to get the truth from her husband, but he forbade her from talking about it and made her clean the grill to ensure no evidence remained. That's when she pulled out the charred documents, put them in a bag, and hid them in a safe place. Heather began to view the whole situation with growing suspicion. She noticed that Berkeley had suddenly shaved his hair and facial hair. Then she found a leather keychain with the word Pontiac and a set of keys in her house. When she asked her husband about it, he admitted he had taken the keys from the girl's car. That's when Heather realized Michael was also involved in the crime. and her suspicions were confirmed the very next day. Michael had about $200 in 20s in his wallet. When Heather asked where he got the money, Michael explained it was the money from the girl they robbed. She couldn't understand why the cash was with her husband if he claimed Berkeley was the one who stole it. One day, seeing the ATM surveillance footage on TV, Heather immediately recognized William Berkeley, though the image was very poor quality. Only then did she realize why her husband's friend had shaved his head and face. Heather wanted to report the crime to the authorities right away, but fear kept her silent for months. She was afraid of her husband. Now that he was behind bars for another charge, Heather decided to share the story and make some money. After speaking with the woman, the detectives went to the prison and brought 23-year-old Michael Jacques to the El Paso police station for questioning. They expected it would be hard to get a confession from him, but it turned out otherwise. The man broke down instantly. He admitted his non-involvement in Sofia Martinez's murder, but insisted it wasn't him who pulled the trigger. It was his friend, William Berkeley. Michael's story differed from what his wife, Heather, had told. Jacques complained to his friend that he needed money for legal fees, and Berkeley promised to take care of it. They started discussing various ways to get cash, and in the end, William suggested robbing someone withdrawing money at an ATM. The two got into a car and drove around the city looking for a suitable spot. Choosing a dimly lit parking lot near a bank, the men parked. Berkeley put on a black beanie and the surgical gloves they had stolen from the hospital. He took a gun and hid in the bushes, waiting for a potential victim. Seeing a brand new red car approaching the ATM, Michael flashed his headlights, signaling Berkeley that the driver likely had money. When Michael noticed a schoolgirl behind the wheel, he allegedly signaled to call it off, but his friend didn't see it. Then everything happened quickly. Jacques didn't have time to react before the red Pontiac pulled out of the lot and sped away. The man claimed he didn't see what happened. He waited for his friend a bit, but when he didn't show up, Michael simply returned to his wife at the hospital. That night, Berkeley showed up there and told him what happened at the ATM. According to William, he shot at the driver's side window to get inside the car. Then, threatening her with the gun, Berkeley demanded the girl withdraw as much cash as possible, but to his disappointment, she only had $200 on her card. Next, William forced Sofia to drive the car to a secluded spot. On the way, the girl begged her abductor to let her live and even offered sexual favors to Berkeley in exchange for her life. When they reached the desert, the man forced Sofia to get out of the car. The girl, sensing her imminent death, asked to take a photo of her younger brother from her purse. Looking at the picture, she tucked it into her bra, close to her heart. That small photo was the only thing connecting Sofia to her family in her final moments. After that, Berkeley pointed the gun at her forehead and fired. When Sofia fell, he emptied the rest of the clip into her. Michael Jacques finished his account of that night. When the detectives asked about the keys to Sofia's car, the young man explained that he had thrown them onto the roof of his house. At first, he wanted to keep them as a trophy, but after seeing the news on TV, he panicked and got rid of the keychain in that odd way. After the interrogation, Michael was returned to prison, and on the roof of his house, they indeed found a set of keys that fit the lock on the victim's car. So, Jacques' story was partly true. The detectives then checked the background of 21-year-old William Joseph Berkeley, Michael's best friend, who allegedly killed Sofia. Berkeley was born in Germany. His family moved to El Paso when he was in 4th grade. William was expelled from school for beating up a female classmate. Berkeley had no criminal record, but co-workers often complained about his rude behavior toward clients. His boss repeatedly warned him, but William ignored it. Berkeley also constantly showed disrespect to other employees, his mother and his ex-girlfriend. At the same time, he often bragged or joked about his violent acts. He told stories about how he once beat a man with a brick because the guy owed him money. Another time, Berkeley stabbed his girlfriend with a fork. In his opinion, the best way to vent anger was to empty a clip into someone's head, which is exactly what he did. His stories about himself only reinforced the image of a cruel person who disregarded social norms and was incapable of remorse. Lately, William had been unemployed and lived with his father or crashed at friends' houses. In 2000, he stayed with Michael and Heather. People who knew him closely thought he wasn't capable of violence. But, as it turned out, they were wrong. On October 1st, 2000, a team of operatives from the El Paso Police Department conducted a raid to arrest Berkeley at his parents' house. They found the young man hiding in a back bedroom. They took him into custody and questioned him about his involvement in Sophia's murder. William didn't go into details. His account was brief. He needed money, went to an ATM, and robbed the first car he saw. His story didn't quite match Michael's, but Berkeley admitted he was the one who took the girl's life. When asked why he did it, since he had already stolen her money, he explained that he always wanted to know what it felt like to take someone's life. Berkeley then claimed he had consensual sex with Sophia, and only afterward did he accidentally shoot her. It's hard to call a sexual encounter consensual when one partner is holding a gun. Perhaps the high schooler hoped to save her life, or maybe he simply forced himself on her. During a second interrogation, Berkeley told a completely different story. Now he claimed he was just the executor. His friend, Michael Jacques, had devised the robbery plan, pointed out which car to rob, and then ordered him to get rid of the girl. William even said he only shot her once and then ran off, certain Sophia wasn't dead. Allegedly, the girl was coming on to him with kisses, and he wanted to wrap things up quickly, so he accidentally pulled the trigger. The second interrogation lasted much longer. The suspect provided far more details about the crime than the first time, but according to him, he was innocent. The main organizer of the crime and murder was his friend Michael. While William was being questioned, investigators searched his parents' house and found several pieces of black clothing similar to what was seen on the surveillance footage, as well as a pair of black sneakers that perfectly matched the shoe print found near Sophia's body. On a nightstand in Berkeley's father's room, the detectives found a .22 caliber revolver. But most importantly, his DNA matched the sample from the perpetrator obtained during the victim's autopsy. After that, both William and Michael were charged with the murder of 18-year-old Sophia Martinez. When Marianne first saw the criminals who took her sister's life, she was shocked. In her mind, she had pictured a huge, terrifying man, but before her stood two skinny, short-looking young men. While in custody, William tried to raise money for his legal defense by selling some of his paintings. As it turned out, his artwork had been displayed at an El Paso museum. So, this guy could have found his calling in art and built his life entirely differently. But he chose a dark path. When the case went to trial, both young men recanted their statements. Nevertheless, in April 2002, William Berkeley was found guilty and sentenced to death by an El Paso County jury for the murder of Sophia Martinez. Throughout his time on death row, William insisted on his innocence and filed several appeals, but all were denied. In 2010, he was executed by lethal injection. Berkeley never expressed remorse for his crime. Michael Jacques, in November 2002, was also found guilty in Sophia's death and sentenced to life in prison. He must serve at least 40 years before being eligible for parole. Heather Pavoke, Michael Jacques' wife, eventually received the reward for providing the information. She divorced her husband as soon as he was locked up. However, her life didn't become happier. Heather passed away in May 2016 at the age of 36. Sophia's younger brothers believed their sister had become an angel in heaven, watching over them from above and protecting them from any troubles. For 2 years, Lourdes kept her daughter's bedroom exactly as Sophia had left it. That place in the house held tender memories. Only with time did she slowly start moving things to the closet. And that allowed the mother to gradually adapt to life without Sophia, symbolizing her healing process. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video. Do you think werewolves exist only in fairy tales? Far from it. A person in a uniform with the distinctive insignia of special services always stands out among others. Soldiers, rescuers, police officers, and private security guards, by their mere appearance, can instill in people a sense of safety and protection from any threat. But sometimes, a person in uniform is a predator. In a broad sense, werewolves and epaulets is a shorthand term for any law enforcement officers who, under the cover of their ranks and positions, commit crimes. Edwin Lara was a true werewolf. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. Bend, Oregon, USA, is a former logging town at the foot of the Cascade Mountains, now a tourist destination. Over the past 25 years, its population has more than doubled, from 50,000 to 100,000 people. People are drawn to Bend's sunny climate, opportunities for hiking, skiing, fishing, and cycling, as well as its local breweries. It's a friendly, peaceful town with a low crime rate. According to FBI statistics, since 1985, Bend has averaged just one murder or manslaughter per year. That's why the local residents were shocked by the events that unfolded in the city in the summer of 2016. No one could have imagined that such a tranquil place could witness an utterly horrific incident. Edwin Enoch Lara was born in Honduras in 1985. When he was 7 years old, his family immigrated to the United States, and he grew up in Bend, Oregon. Edwin had a fairly normal childhood, though he never met his biological father, as he was raised by his mother and stepfather, Jose. The boy grew up calm and friendly. Edwin was very sociable and always had a ton of friends. He never got into trouble, wasn't aggressive, and had a great relationship with his parents. But at some point, everything fell apart. Edwin dropped out of school, started dabbling in illegal substances and alcohol. His life went downhill, but at some point, he managed to overcome his problems and get back on track. At the age of 20, Edwin Lara met a woman named Isabel Ponce. He fell in love almost instantly and proposed to Isabel. The newlyweds developed a good relationship. Their marriage, in its early years, could easily be called ideal. They attended church together every weekend. Edwin was described as a caring and attentive husband. But something dark was simmering inside him, and one day, that dark side surfaced. At some point, Lara realized that his dream was to become a police officer. He was drawn to this job not because he wanted to help people, catch criminals, or maintain order in the city. Edwin wanted power, to control people and exploit his position. As it happened, his wife, Isabel, also wanted to become a police officer. It was their shared dream, differing only in their motivations. After the young couple married, they both enrolled in Central Oregon Community College, where they studied criminal justice and worked toward the qualifications needed to become police officers. It was during his college years that Edwin's personality completely changed. From a sociable guy, he suddenly became very withdrawn and fell out with almost all his friends. The once well-mannered young man turned into a rude, aggressive individual. Another factor that triggered changes in Lara's character was his fascination with serial killers. In college classes, they often studied various crimes. Edwin meticulously researched the lives of famous serial killers and felt admiration for their actions. He developed an unhealthy obsession, viewing killers as heroes. In his eyes, they possessed absolute power and control. In his view, they held someone's life in their hands, deciding whether to let a person live or make them die in agony. Edwin Lara's idol was Angel Resendiz, known as the Railroad Killer. He was suspected of 23 murders committed across the United States and Mexico. Most of his crimes were committed near railroads, in places where he jumped off the trains he traveled on. Edwin created an extensive presentation about this man, using real photographs of victims. Lara also gave a report on the life of another of his idols, Adolf Hitler. The man became so engrossed in the biographies of criminals that he himself developed an overwhelming desire to control human lives. Edwin yearned to feel absolute power and control over someone. This desire consumed all his thoughts and only grew stronger over time. At one point in his life, Lara was greatly irritated by the uncle of a former girlfriend, and Edwin came close to sending the man to the grave. Fortunately, he talked himself out of the murder, knowing that his actions would ruin the good relationship he had with his wife, Isabel. Lara didn't want to harm his spouse, so he simply learned to manage his urges. Indeed, only one woman in Edwin's life was capable of keeping him on the right path. However, Isabel herself had no idea about this. Everything changed when, after graduating from college, the Lara couple both applied to the police academy. They were on the verge of fulfilling their dream of becoming law enforcement officers, but Edwin failed the entrance exam while his wife passed the test successfully. Lara couldn't believe this had happened to him. His dream came true for Isabel, not for him. This situation threw the man so off balance that he directed all his anger over his failure at his wife, as if she were to blame for his failure to pass the police academy entrance exam. Now, Edwin had to find a job. He joined the security service at Central Oregon Community College, where he had previously studied, and became a security guard on campus. Due to her training at the police academy, Isabel was often away from home. This infuriated Edwin so much that he decided to take revenge on her. The man started an affair with another woman named Alice, who lived in California. The couple's marriage was already on the brink, and Lara made the situation even worse. Edwin had a burner phone to communicate with his mistress and a secret social media account. He told Alice that he was a police officer and fabricated a new life story. While Isabel was away for hours at the police academy, her husband brought another woman into their home, took her on lavish dates, stayed with her in trendy hotels, and threw intimate parties. At his new job in campus security, Edwin's personality became even stranger. He began boasting to colleagues about his affair, showing explicit photos of himself with his mistress. Many started avoiding this eccentric man because few were interested in what he was doing behind his wife's back. This was especially true for female colleagues, who felt uncomfortable around Edwin. Then Lara started showing other security guards images of dead bodies, photos he found online, printed out or saved on his phone. These pictures became another obsession for him, as did videos of random deaths, car accidents, drownings, and the like. Edwin enjoyed watching his colleagues wrinkle their noses in disgust and turn away from the gruesome images and videos. In 2016, Isabel found out about her husband's secret affair. She felt betrayed and was shocked by how Edwin had treated her. Moreover, she simply couldn't understand what she had done to deserve such treatment. Lara, realizing he might lose the woman he loved forever, immediately broke off the affair and begged his wife to give him another chance to fix everything. In the end, Isabel decided not to act rashly and tried to save the relationship. She did give her husband a second chance, but trust was undermined. The betrayed wife decided to monitor Edwin's behavior outside the home and often visited his workplace to see what he was up to. This went on for nearly 6 months. During that time, Lara gave his wife no reason to doubt his words, and trust in the couple gradually returned. Due to his wife's vigilant oversight, Edwin spent more and more time alone. He no longer bothered his colleagues, didn't talk to friends, and didn't look at other women. During that period, his dark criminal impulses began to resurface. It was then that he crossed paths with a girl named Kaylee Sawyer. Kaylee Sawyer was born on March 2nd, 1993, in Bend, Oregon. She was the eldest of 5 siblings and stood out from childhood for her kindness and care for those around her. A smile never left her face, so she could get along with absolutely any stranger. Friends said Kaylee was beautiful both inside and out. She loved to draw, write poetry, snowboard, and take photos. Kaylee dreamed of becoming a neurosurgeon or some other kind of doctor to have the opportunity to help people. After high school, she earned a medical degree and started working as a dental assistant. At the same time, she met and began dating a young man named Cameron Reimhofer. At 23, Kaylee decided to continue her education and enrolled in Central Oregon Community College, where Edwin Lara was working as a security guard at the time. Kaylee and Cameron found an apartment on the edge of the campus, nestled in the shade of tall pines with a view of the mountains, and started living together. On Saturday, July 23, 2016, Kaylee Sawyer went to a close friend's bachelorette party, which she had been eagerly awaiting for what felt like forever. What started as a wonderful summer evening ended in an utterly unimaginable nightmare for the girl. Kaylee, dressed in a black dress, had fun with her friends, hopping from bar to bar, indulging in drinks, and dancing the night away. Around midnight, Sawyer texted her boyfriend Cameron to come pick her up and take her home. On their way back to the apartment they shared, they got into a heated argument. The reason for the dispute remains unknown. Just before reaching the entrance to their building, Kaylee jumped out of the car and walked in the opposite direction. Apparently, the girl wanted to cool off and clear her head after the alcohol. Cameron went up to the apartment and waited a bit. He hoped his girlfriend would follow him, but she didn't. 10 minutes later, the young man went back downstairs, but Sawyer was nowhere to be found. In fact, such behavior was quite normal for Kaylee. She was an impulsive girl. When the couple argued, Kaylee always needed to be alone to calm down quickly and sort out her feelings. So this time too, the guy didn't think much of the situation, knowing Sawyer would return once she calmed down. Cameron called her phone, but she didn't answer, and then he sent a dozen messages urging his girlfriend to come back. However, at some point, the messages stopped going through. Kaylee's phone became unreachable. Reimhofer got into the car and started searching, driving around nearby streets to no avail. After circling the area a couple of times, the upset man returned to the apartment and went to bed. The young man hoped to wake up in the morning and find Kaylee at home, but she didn't show up the next morning either. That's when the guy truly panicked. He started calling his girlfriend's number non-stop, but all calls went to voicemail. Cameron called Kaylee's father, hoping she had spent the night at her parents' place, but the man said he hadn't seen his daughter in recent days. Later on Sunday, when the girl still hadn't appeared and no one knew where she was, her boyfriend called the 911 and reported the disappearance of 23-year-old Kaylee Sawyer. However, as often happens, the police weren't in a hurry to start searching. The girl was an adult and had the right to go wherever she pleased. Cameron was advised to wait. If his girlfriend didn't show up within 48 hours, they would declare her missing and then take action. The guy sensed trouble, but didn't know what to do next. But Kaylee's mom, Julie, wasn't about to sit idly by. She was certain her daughter would have warned her parents if she were planning to go somewhere. The woman felt in her gut that something was wrong. She called the police herself and claimed her daughter suffered from seizures. In truth, this was a white lie to spur action. The girl had indeed experienced seizures in her teenage years, but that was long in the past. Julie knew the authorities would be more likely to start searching if they believed Kaylee was ill. The police did indeed spring into action before the 48-hour mark. First, they brought Cameron Reimhofer to the police station and questioned him about the argument in the car that led to the girl getting out and disappearing in an unknown direction. Kaylee's boyfriend was the last person to see her alive, so it's understandable why the detectives treated him with suspicion. The young man answered all questions clearly. It was clear how worried he was about his girlfriend and how genuinely he cared for her safety. Even an inexperienced officer could tell that Cameron loved Kaylee with all his heart. When Monday morning came and Sawyer didn't show up for work, the police concluded that something bad had happened to her. The search began. As usual, detectives first interviewed all her acquaintances, then started combing the city and surrounding areas. Volunteers joined the authorities. But where could the girl have vanished to in the middle of the night? On Saturday evening, when Kaylee jumped out of her boyfriend's car, she went for a walk to calm down after the argument. Her phone battery was nearly dead. She didn't know where to go, and her feet led her to the campus of Central Oregon Community College. On the college campus, Kaylee came across a security guard sitting in a service vehicle that resembled a police SUV. The girl immediately felt safe. As she passed by, the man got out of the vehicle and called out to the student. It was Edwin Lara, dressed in a security guard uniform and armed with a pepper spray canister, handcuffs, and a bulletproof vest. That day, he was working the night shift, which ended at 2 in the morning. We'll likely never know what they talked about. Perhaps the guard offered to drive the girl home or let her use his phone. Whatever the case, Kaylee ended up in the back seat of the service vehicle driven by Lara. The security vehicle closely resembled a police car. The back seats were separated from the front by a metal barrier, a grate. The doors locked automatically, so anyone in the back couldn't get out on their own. That's the trap Sawyer fell into. Her phone had completely died. The girl couldn't call her boyfriend or anyone else for help, and Edwin decided to take advantage of the situation and offered Kaylee sex. Naturally, Sawyer refused. The persistent guard then promised to pay her money, but she rejected the offer again. At that moment, Lara flew into a rage and began acting extremely disrespectfully. It's said that Kaylee's manner of dress made her look like a prostitute. As soon as the man started showing aggression, the girl panicked in earnest. Unable to escape the car, she began screaming to attract someone's attention, but her behavior only enraged Edwin further. He left the driver's seat, opened the back door, and began choking Kaylee. The student was terrified, but still tried to fight back, though the odds were against her. Lara easily overpowered the young, tipsy girl, and she lost consciousness. He then drove her to an abandoned parking lot where no one had parked in ages. Kaylee came to, and likely realized how this story would end. She tried to reach through the metal grate to the dashboard to activate the flashing lights on the car's roof, or turn on the siren, still hoping to attract attention with noise. Of course, she failed. As soon as the car stopped at the abandoned lot, Edwin pulled Kaylee out of the vehicle and threw her to the ground. Then he straddled her and squeezed her throat with his hands. The girl lost consciousness again. To finish her off quickly, Lara grabbed a nearby stone and struck Sawyer's head several times. The man was 100% certain he had taken the student's life. Then he pulled down his pants and assaulted her lifeless body. After satisfying his perverse fantasies, Edwin heard that Kaylee was still breathing. He dragged the half-dead girl behind nearby trees, where an unbearable desire to finish what he started overwhelmed him. Those thoughts had clouded his mind for years, and now he was irritated with himself for not being able to accomplish his goal the first time, to take someone's life. The man found a boulder and began striking the victim's head with all his might. He stopped only when he was convinced that Sawyer had truly passed into the afterlife. The choice of weapon was not random. Edwin's idol, Angel Rezendiz, the railroad killer, always used objects lying around nearby as weapons. He didn't plan attacks in advance, and that's exactly how the guard acted that night. After the horrific murder, Lara simply left Kaylee's body on the ground and drove back to the college campus. He showered and chatted about trivial matters with his colleagues. Then he wiped down the interior of the service vehicle with wet wipes to erase any trace of Sawyer's presence. After finishing his shift, Edwin got into his personal car and returned to the victim's body. He wrapped Kaylee's head in a plastic bag to avoid getting blood in his car, then loaded the lifeless girl into the trunk. Driving to a remote area, the man dumped the body in a ditch and calmly went home to his wife. The next day, Sunday, Edwin and Isabel went to church, then visited a movie theater. Lara acted a bit strange, more pensive than usual. However, Isabel attributed it to problems in their marriage. She worried that her husband had started another affair and didn't know how to confess. But the reality was far worse than the woman could have imagined. In truth, Edwin was being torn apart by his dark secret. He could no longer keep it inside. So on Monday morning, he went to the kitchen, where Isabel was getting ready for work. Through tears, he told the following story. During his shift, while patrolling the campus in the service vehicle, Edwin hit a woman who darted out of the darkness. He simply didn't see her. Then, frightened of the consequences, he drove the dead body far from the college campus and dumped it somewhere on the highway. As soon as Isabel, shocked by her husband's story, began asking why he did it and why he didn't call an ambulance, Edwin panicked. he clearly lost his composure. Grabbing his wife's service pistol, Lara jumped into his car and sped off in an unknown direction. Since Isabel was a police officer, she immediately went to the nearest police station and reported that her husband, Edwin Lara, a security guard at Central Oregon Community College, had confessed to a crime. She also reported that her husband had fled, taking her service weapon. The woman feared that, in his state, he was liable to harm himself and begged the detectives to find Edwin as soon as possible. The police, however, believed their main concern was ensuring no one else got hurt. Edwin had fled with a gun. He had just confessed to a murder and was clearly in a state of panic, meaning he was capable of anything. Detectives immediately went to the Lara couple's home to find any clues and figure out where the man might have gone. And soon, they made a shocking discovery. In a shed in the backyard, investigators found a woman's purse soaked in blood. Inside were documents in the name of Kaylee Sawyer, her blood-stained shoes, and some other small items, the description of which filled 62 pages. As soon as the data was entered into the system, it immediately became clear that the girl had gone missing over the weekend. In addition to Sawyer's belongings, detectives found Edwin's uniform in the house. He clearly planned to dispose of it somehow in the future. There was also a short college paper about the railroad killer. All of this pointed to the criminal's possible next steps. Edwin Lara's involvement in Kaylee's disappearance became undeniable after the discovery of these items, and he was declared wanted on suspicion of murder. While the investigation was piecing together the possible sequence of Isabel's husband's actions, a plan to intercept the suspect's vehicle was implemented on all roads in Oregon and neighboring California. Lara needed to be apprehended as quickly as possible because he was armed and dangerous, but Edwin himself had entirely different plans, as he was already hunting for a new victim. 19-year-old Andrea Mays finished her shift at a mall in Salem, Oregon, and was about to drive home to her boyfriend. She was sitting in her car, oblivious to her surroundings, scrolling through social media, and then took a selfie to post on Snapchat. The girl had just typed a message to a friend and was about to hit send when a hand suddenly reached through the window. At first, Andrea thought her colleagues were playing a prank. But then the stranger leaned in, opened the passenger side door, climbed inside, and held a gun to Mace's head. That man was Edwin Lara, and he demanded that Andrea start the car and head toward California. The terrified girl was ready to do anything to keep the gun in the assailant's hand from firing. She followed all the kidnapper's instructions and drove onto the highway leading to the neighboring state. Along the way, Edwin told the girl how he had been sitting in a parking lot, scoping out his next prey. Earlier, he had approached a pregnant woman, but she, without even realizing the danger, completely ignored the man as if he were nothing. Then Lara spotted Andrea and realized she was an even better fit for his second victim. In reality, the guard was furious that he couldn't intimidate the pregnant woman and was now venting his frustration on his captive. Then he began describing his recent attack on Kaylee Sawyer in detail. Edwin deliberately embellished the details to see Andrea get nervous. He enjoyed shocking and intimidating people, especially women, because they were easier to overpower. All this was happening on the evening of Monday, July 25th, 2016, 2 days after the murder of Kaylee. When it got completely dark, Edwin said they should stop and spend the night at a motel. To avoid arousing suspicion, Lara forced Andrea to pretend to be his girlfriend. He told her that if she tried to call for help, she would die, and so would anyone nearby. Once in the motel room, the man handcuffed his captive to the bathroom door and pulled a t-shirt over her head so she couldn't see anything. Then he showered and dragged the girl to the bed. Edwin forced her to take a sleeping pill and began making advances when Andrea's phone vibrated. It was actually her alarm, but the girl quickly came up with a story claiming she had a sexually transmitted infection, and this was a reminder to take her medication. Andrea was desperate to avoid physical contact with her captor, so she blurted out the first excuse that came to mind. Fortunately, it worked, as Edwin's greatest fear in life was contracting an STD. The girl deliberately went into detail, seeing how it unnerved the assailant. Stunned, Lara backed off from the girl but now couldn't calm down. He declared that he wanted to go out right then and shoot everyone in the motel. Apparently, this thought had been nagging at him for a while and kept him from sleeping, and the man was also worried that the police were on his trail. At 1:30 in the morning, Edwin dragged the sleepy girl out of the room, put her in the front seat, and got behind the wheel of her car, declaring that Andrea would be his human shield. The dangerous journey continued. In the early hours of Tuesday, July 26th, as they crossed the border into California, the man noticed that Mace's car was malfunctioning. He decided to stop and steal another vehicle. Pulling into a parking lot at a roadside motel, Edwin spotted a man named Jack Levi, who was loading photography equipment into his car after spending the night at the motel. Laura approached Jack and, pulling out the gun, demanded the car keys. Jack, caught off guard, started shouting, resulting in a bullet to the stomach, and Edwin hurried to flee the scene, dragging a sleepy Andrea behind him. Fortunately, Jack Levi survived. Motel staff heard the commotion and called an ambulance. Meanwhile, Lara and his captive ran to a nearby gas station, where he immediately spotted an old Honda with 3 passengers. That's where he headed, taking even more hostages. Edwin wasn't fazed at all that the car contained a 76-year-old woman with her 2 teenage grandsons. The boy's father and grandfather were at the gas station at the time. Holding the 3 family members at gunpoint, Lara shoved Andrea into the back seat and settled into the passenger seat. He put the 17-year-old boy behind the wheel. The kid had only recently gotten his driver's license and now found himself in such a dire situation, essentially taking responsibility for the lives of his younger brother and grandmother. The owner of the car stolen from the gas station, the elderly woman's son and the father of the 2 teens, was stunned to see his dog running loose and his family's car speeding away. Witnesses to the brazen kidnapping helped him make sense of the situation, and within minutes, the man reported the incident to the police. Edwin had completely lost it. Waving the gun, he snatched a cell phone from one of the teens to prevent the boy from calling emergency services. Then, calming down a bit, Lara told his hostages how badly he wanted to take someone's life. He recounted how he had already sent one girl to the grave and shot a man in the motel parking lot. At the same time, the kidnapper tried to convince his unwilling listeners that he used to be a good guy, a police officer. Likely, Lara was still bitter about not becoming a law enforcement officer with power over people. The teen behind the wheel decided to capitalize on the criminal's good mood and appealed to his lighter side. The boy played on the fact that their grandmother was an elderly, vulnerable woman. He and his brother were just kids, and surely Edwin didn't want to harm an old lady whose days were numbered, or schoolboys who hadn't yet seen life. Astonishingly, his words actually had an effect. After driving about 50 kilometers, Lara dropped off the grandmother and her grandsons near a small town. He said they had annoyed him with their whining and tears, so they could continue their journey without him. Andrea also tried to beg for her freedom, but she failed because Edwin needed a human shield. He told the girl she would stay with him until the end. Leaving the 3 hostages on the roadside, the old Honda sped off. At some point, Lara got the idea to record a video confessing his crimes and post it online. Then he decided to do it live so millions could see it. Edwin dreamed of becoming famous and craved public attention. The man asked Andrea to start recording on her phone's camera and capture what he would say. However, Mays proved to be more resourceful. She managed to adjust the privacy settings to make the video viewable only to herself and pretended to go live from her account. On camera, Edwin said that he would likely be caught, so he was apologizing in advance for everything he had done. He also told Andrea's family that she would be fine since she had followed all his orders. He was actually a decent guy and regretted what he had done. Then Lara confessed to all his crimes and asked the authorities not to shoot at him so Andrea wouldn't get hurt. After the impromptu performance on camera, Edwin turned the lens on the girl to back up his words and show that she was okay. Even as a murderer, Lara wanted to be liked by others. He wanted to become famous, like the serial killers he idolized. But Mays didn't want her family, friends, and colleagues to see the video, so she restricted access to her account. At least that day, she denied this man the chance to become famous. After recording the video, Lara called his wife, Isabel. His spouse begged Edwin to surrender and not hurt anyone else, but instead, the man floored the gas pedal and sped down the highway even faster. At that very moment, a chase was already underway. A highway patrol officer spotted a car racing at a high speed on the interstate and tried to stop it. When the driver didn't comply, the officer turned on the flashing lights on his patrol car and followed the violator. Edwin was losing control and becoming increasingly unhinged and dangerous. At that moment, a police helicopter appeared out of nowhere and joined the pursuit. Perhaps the police had traced the call to Isabel or located the Honda with the help of the hostages Edwin had released. After a chase at speeds exceeding 160 kilometers per hour, after some deliberation, Edwin called 911 and said he wanted to surrender. Lara explained to the dispatcher that he had killed 2 people and kidnapped a girl, and he had a weapon and a bulletproof vest. A few minutes later, the man slowed down and stopped. The car was immediately surrounded by police. Edwin Lara was finally arrested. Andrea was overjoyed that the nightmare was over, but unfortunately that wasn't entirely true. The police considered the girl an accomplice, so they pulled her out of the car, handcuffed her, and took her to the police station as a suspect. They took her fingerprints and subjected her to a strip search before locking her in a cell. The captive had to wait several hours to be questioned, and only then did law enforcement realize they were dealing with a kidnapping victim. The capture of the dangerous criminal was reported on television. When Kaylee Sawyer's parents learned that the kidnapped girl was alive, they hoped their daughter would soon return home safe and sound. They immediately contacted the police. Unfortunately, their hopes were shattered. It turned out that the girl in the car with Edwin wasn't Kaylee at all. Meanwhile, detectives began interrogating the suspect, a process that lasted about 6 hours. Lara clearly enjoyed the sound of his own voice. Most of the time, he tried to convince the investigators that he was a good guy, and at the start of the interrogation, the police also had a glimmer of hope that Sawyer was still alive. But soon, Edwin confessed that the girl was no longer alive. The man revealed that he had dumped her body in a ditch near his parents' house. Edwin also admitted that for a very long time, he had a strong desire to take lives, but he could control it thanks to his wife Isabel. Edwin Lara was charged with murder. At the same time, the police suspected he might be linked to other crimes, but they couldn't find any evidence of other victims. Kaylee Sawyer's body was found on the roadside with signs of violent death. The autopsy confirmed that the cause of death was head trauma from a blunt object, strangulation, and sexual assault. Wounds on the girl's body indicated that she had fought desperately for her life. At the trial, attended by Sawyer's family members, Lara tried to beg for their forgiveness. He said a prayer for Kaylee, during which most of her family simply left the courtroom. To avoid the death penalty, Lara pleaded guilty to manslaughter with aggravating circumstances. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. At a second trial for the kidnapping of Andrea Mays, Edwin also pleaded guilty and received another life sentence. In 2019, Oregon passed a state law called Kaylee's Law, which mandated stricter background checks for security guards during hiring and changes to regulations regarding the uniforms and vehicles of private security firms. It's terrifying to realize that a person in a uniform meant to protect citizens' peace can become a monster. The only comfort is that Edwin Lara will now have to wear a prison uniform for the rest of his life. And of course, that's far from the uniform he dreamed of. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video. Donna and Gulam Munda were the envy of many residents in their small town in western Pennsylvania. She was an attractive American, a former cheerleader. He was a wealthy, beloved doctor from India. Their romance lasted a quarter of a century until a mysterious gunman shattered the fragile facade of perfection, exposing a marriage rife with betrayal, infidelity, and abuse of illegal drugs. Many people fear scheduling important dates on the 13th, and if it falls on a Friday, the anxiety increases exponentially. 2005, Friday, May 13th. Not the luckiest date in some people's eyes. However, if everything went according to plan, for Donna Munda, this day would become the happiest day of her life. She was always considered positive and cheerful, but in recent months, there was no trace of positivity left. Donna's marriage was falling apart. On May 13th, she planned to get rid of her tiresome husband with the help of a young lover to finally breathe freely. Ghulam Munda, Donna's husband, was significantly older than her. People admired his generosity, friendliness, and openness. For Ghulam, Friday the 13th would become the worst day on earth. Ghulam loved and supported his wife. He was the ideal husband. So what happened? How did a loving wife turn into a monster who coldly watched as her spouse was deprived of life? Ghulam Munda, a brilliant doctor and immigrant who achieved success. Ghulam loved America and its wealth. He liked expensive cars, jewelry, watches, custom-tailored suits. The man believed that if you have money, you should spend it on what you love and enjoy it. Ghulam was a big spender and always carried a wad of cash in his wallet. He often joked with friends, saying that if someone robbed him, he wanted the robber to leave satisfied. Besides cars and jewelry, Ghulam couldn't resist beautiful women. If he liked someone, he immediately started flirting and tried to ask them out on a date. That's how, at 43, Ghulam met Donna, a modest young woman who had graduated high school 3 years earlier. She grew up in a middle-class Christian family, where they went to church every Sunday, where children obeyed their parents and tried to stay out of trouble. Donna graduated from college and returned to work in her community. The senior hospital doctor, Ghulam Munda, and the attractive former cheerleader hit it off easily and quickly found common ground. The man was twice her age, and this age difference worried Donna a little. But Dr. Munda knew how to talk to women. The charming doctor showered the pretty blonde with lavish gifts. Over the next 12 years, he helped his young beloved train as a nurse and then funded her master's degree. Donna became a top-tier nurse anesthetist. During this time, Ghulam and Donna grew closer and closer. At first, the girl didn't consider the older man as a boyfriend, but then she fell head over heels in love with him. Ghulam's friends thought their couple was wonderful. Donna was very pleasant to talk to, so the doctor's colleagues hinted to him that it was time to get married. They believed Donna was the best match for him. They married when Donna was 30 and Ghulam turned 54. Right after the wedding, the newlyweds moved into a stunning modern house in a picturesque area on a plot of over 6,000 square meters with well-groomed shrubs and trees. In the small town, they were considered almost a celebrity couple. Like many people who achieved success in life, Ghulam Munda started from the bottom. He was born into a poor family in India. Sometimes the boy ate only once a day because there was simply no food in the house, but Ghulam still managed to become a doctor. At 34, he came to America to advance his qualifications in urology, a very complex medical discipline. Ghulam settled in Hermitage, Pennsylvania, a peaceful family town with a population of 16,000. Years ago, immigrants came there to work in steel mills, but then the mills closed and medicine became the growing industry. Munda became one of the first urologists in Hermitage and quickly built a large client base, so he knew many people in the community. Ghulam was an excellent doctor. He treated patients like his own family, was kind and sincere, and knew that not only in India but even in a wealthy country, people could suffer greatly from various diseases. In Hermitage, Ghulam Munda was loved, valued, and respected. When a patient couldn't afford prescribed medication, the doctor ordered the drug and paid for it out of his own pocket. The man remembered the hardships he faced in childhood and didn't want anyone to repeat his sad experience. Dr. Munda also established an Islamic studies department at the State University in a nearby Ohio city. Until the final chapter, Ghulam Munda's life story could have been a perfect lesson about how hard work and self-sacrifice pay off, and his life in hermitage was the embodiment of his dream. It was into this life that he brought his young wife. Donna worked on her own medical career as a nurse anesthetist. They were a wonderful, respected couple until a tragedy struck the woman's life. Donna lost her father, her main support and pillar. This dealt a devastating blow to her psyche. When her father died of a brain hemorrhage, Donna was inconsolable because she had always been a daddy's girl. Her entire life changed from that moment. The young woman fell into such deep depression that she distanced herself from all her friends and loved ones. It was as if, with her father's death, the spark that gave her strength for life had gone out. Most likely, it was her father's passing that triggered Donna's downfall, plunging her into a world of addiction and causing the tragic death of her husband. From a hard-working nurse saving lives, Donna turned into a cold-blooded and ruthless criminal who targeted a loved one. Due to intense work and her father's untimely death, Donna felt as if she were sinking into an abyss of loneliness and hopelessness. When a person is drowning and can't get out on their own, they desperately need a savior to extend a helping hand. At the same time, the woman was diagnosed with kidney stones, and she developed terrible back pain. Ghulam took his wife to all sorts of tests, but Donna felt that the husband who had been by her side all these years had now become distant, indifferent, and absent. Donna was in severe depression and needed support and praise. Serious problems began in the star couple from Hermitage. Donna turned 40 and Ghulam was already over 60. She needed energy and emotional uplift to climb out of the routine that had engulfed her. But he wasn't quite ready for that. Due to Ghulam's health issues, the couple's intimate life became less vibrant and fulfilling than before. Their relationship cooled somewhat. For a while, Donna's work helped her forget about emotional problems. It consumed her entirely, leaving no time for self-reflection. Her duties involved relieving patients' physical pain. Meanwhile, Donna herself was battling emotional pain. Medications that could dull physical suffering could also help with her ailment. Besides all the obvious dangers nurses faced, there was one little-known risk. No matter what was happening in their lives, they had to focus on the patient's pain because a few drops of medicine in a medical worker's hands could relieve people of excruciating suffering. But when a nurse was exhausted, when her body could no longer handle the strain, those little vials of medicine began to tempt her. No one knew how many doctors and nurses used drugs meant for patients, but such workers existed, and Donna Munda was one of them. She resorted to using a prescription drug that couldn't be detected in drug tests. This medication was very potent and instantly addictive. Just a few drops were enough. In Donna's opinion, no one would know whether the patient received the full dose or if the nurse kept something for herself for a rainy day. Donna had been on the edge for a long time, so she started taking the painkiller. At first, she just wanted to ease the pain in her back and kidneys. Plus, it dulled the grief of losing her father. But then things spiraled out of control and led to tragic consequences. The woman became hooked on the drug and could no longer function without it. Naturally, she kept her addiction a secret from everyone. The eternal optimist Ghulam tried to stay positive and support his wife in every way. They had been married for 20 years, but the man still treated her like a young girl. The problem was that now he and Donna were no longer on the same wavelength. Even close friends couldn't understand what was happening to her. Donna seemed to withdraw into herself, stopped answering calls, and refused to socialize. All this led to the woman finding herself in a very difficult situation. Donna distanced herself from her old friends, but still tried to play the role of a happy wife with her husband and his friends. None of Ghulam's colleagues even suspected that she was suffering from a destructive addiction. Donna lived a double life. However, the problem existed, and it was getting worse. The fact that painkillers were easily accessible to a medical worker didn't mean their use went unmonitored. One day, Donna was caught. It was her first offense, So she was given probation and required to undergo rehabilitation, but she was fired from the hospital. Donna's charges of using illegal substances weren't made public because she didn't plead guilty, didn't show up to court, and acted as if nothing had happened. She and her husband tried to keep this unsightly truth a secret from everyone. Not wanting to air their dirty laundry, the couple withdrew into themselves. Donna, who had worked as a nurse for a long time, at 42 turned into an unemployed, addicted woman who no longer had access to prescription drugs. Her body craved a dose. The woman was morally, emotionally, and physically broken. She didn't know what to do or whom to turn to. Donna couldn't ask her husband for help because he was angry and frankly didn't understand what was going on. Donna needed to find another way to solve the problem. It could have been rehabilitation. Taking responsibility was part of recovery. Detoxification is hell, but it's nothing compared to emotional turmoil. Instead of changing themselves, many people simply look for a new way to escape reality. In the rehabilitation center, Donna found a new obsession. His name was Damien Bradford. This acquaintance boded nothing good for Ghulam Munda. Damien was a good-looking 23-year-old guy. He had repeatedly gotten into trouble with the law for drug dealing and use. The guy dabbled in steroids to build muscle mass to impress women. At the time, Damien was on probation. Given his criminal activities in the small Pennsylvania town, Bradford was considered a thug, but he had an attractive appearance. In Damien, Donna found a reason to live. In the arms of her new boyfriend, the woman felt happiness. Lying in bed with her young lover, Donna hatched a plan to eliminate the only obstacle preventing her from living life to the fullest, her husband. She decided that the best way to start over was to get rid of the old. When Donna Munda first appeared at the rehabilitation center, she was dressed to the nines. Hairstyle, makeup, jewelry, high heels. She didn't look like a stereotypical patient, so she immediately caught the young guy's attention. Damien, well-groomed, muscular, very polite, and courteous, also appealed to Donna. She hadn't received so many compliments from a man in a long time, so she lost her head to the flood of emotions. Romances sometimes sparked in rehabilitation centers. When a person breaks free from their destructive addiction, a void forms inside them, and it needs to be filled with something. Damien and Donna started meeting secretly and then entered into an intimate relationship. There was that chemistry between them that Donna didn't have with Ghulam. Perhaps the sense of danger added a thrill. At home, Donna said that rehabilitation helped be new, feel like a living person, a new woman. Damien lived in an apartment with a roommate. To see each other more often and at any time, Donna found him separate housing and paid the rent herself. She gave him money for clothes and other expenses. The guy essentially became a kept lover. Donna was hooked again because this was another full-scale, all-consuming addiction. The woman was obsessed with her young boyfriend. They talked on the phone or texted each other at least 40 times a day. Damien called her baby, and she called him daddy. For a middle-aged woman, it sounded strange, but that's how it was. In her vulnerable state, Donna needed this attention to feel needed. When Donna fell in love with Damien, living with Ghulam became impossible. Their relationship began to crumble completely. In conversations with her lover, the woman called her husband a prison warden who watched her every move. But Ghulam had money and power. Leaving him meant losing both. She told Damien that Ghulam was a cruel, domineering man who controlled her both mentally and physically. Donna deliberately painted this portrait so that her lover would dislike her husband in advance and also want to get rid of him. If at first Damien saw his girlfriend as a temporary fling, later, getting to know her better, he began to feel genuine, sincere feelings. However, he had his own relationship problems. It seemed that his former roommate, with whom he shared an apartment, considered herself his fiancée. The girl's name was Charlene McFrazier, and she was unhappy that her fiancé had been stolen by some married 40-year-old woman. Charlene called Dr. Munda and told him about his wife's affair. That's how the secret became public, and it hit Donna's marriage hard. It turned out that Gulam, for all his generosity, was also very prudent. He had taken some precautions in case the marriage fell apart or unforeseen circumstances arose. Long ago, he and Donna had signed a prenuptial agreement. If they separated, the wife would receive $250,000. But now Gulam's wealth had grown several times over. Dr. Munda was hurt, but not vindictive. Gulam decided that if Donna wanted to leave, he would let her go and even offer a larger sum than stipulated in the prenup. $1 million to make it quick and easy. But Donna refused. The thing was, Dr. Munda's medical practice had made him one of the wealthiest people in Hermitage. The woman knew the contract would only be valid in case of a divorce, and now she was thinking about how to get her fair share to leave the marriage, make her lover happy, and fully tie him to her. Gulam was already in his late 60s. Donna decided that he didn't have long to live anyway, so why not speed things up a bit? Damien considered himself a bad boy, but what was happening now was far worse than just bad behavior. Donna offered her lover half of Dr. Munda's fortune in exchange for helping her get rid of her husband. Damien Bradford was used to women spending money on him. His lover's proposal would completely change his lifestyle. He agreed not only for the money, but also because he was infatuated with Donna. He just wanted to please his girlfriend. So, Gulam had to die. Donna's plan seemed simple. The idea was to make the crime look like a random attack. She told Damien that her husband regularly went to the mosque. Then she gave Bradford a map and explained how to get there. Donna's friends and family didn't know about her dubious connections with a convicted drug dealer, but they had other reasons to worry. In late 2004, Donna told relatives that she was concerned about her husband. He always carried wads of cash, and his wife feared that one day Gulam might become a robbery victim. Thus, the cunning wife was laying the groundwork in advance. Choosing a day, Damien settled in his car near the mosque. He held a 9mm pistol and waited for Dr. Munda to leave the building to shoot him right on the street. All this time, the guy was talking to Donna on his cell phone. His lover encouraged him and gave friendly advice, but the assassination never happened. Either Damien hesitated, or he didn't get the chance to pull the trigger. The mosque plan failed, but the lovers quickly came up with another. On May 13, 2005, Donna, her 74-year-old mother Dorothy, and Gulam would set off in their gold Jaguar to Toledo, Ohio, to look at a house Dr. Munda wanted to buy for his nephew. The conspirators decided that during the trip, they would have a perfect opportunity to ambush Gulam unexpectedly. While Donna planned her husband's murder at home and in public, she played the role of a happy wife. And although the doctor knew about her affair, he didn't even show his friends that they had problems in their relationship. The woman probably felt that every day brought her closer to the moment when she would get rid of her aging husband, and she and Damien would be together, rich and free. So she diligently portrayed a loving spouse. The day before the trip to Toledo, Donna discussed the final details of the plan with her lover. Baby and Daddy were confident they would succeed. The attack, disguised as a robbery, was ready. May 2005, Friday the 13th, Damien dressed all in black, hoodie, baseball cap, shirt, and pants. Donna sent a few seemingly harmless messages to her lover, but in reality, they were a signal that the couple was about to leave. Damien watched from his hideout as Donna, Gulam, and Dorothy left the house and got into the car together. Then he followed their gold Jaguar. Donna invited her elderly mother on the trip. Dorothy was fond of Gulam since he had helped her daughter get an education, and Donna decided to give her mother one last chance to spend time with her son-in-law. After a gas station stop, Donna took over driving from her husband to make it easier for Damien to shoot Gulam. All this time, Bradford followed at a distance since Dr. Munda took a different road than he had planned. The guy had to improvise on the fly. Donna drove for about an hour before pulling over to the side of the road again. She pretended to have a stomach upset. Damien sped up and pulled alongside the Jaguar. The plan that Donna and Damien had been developing for months finally worked. Dr. Munda was about to step onto the shoulder when a guy dressed in all black rushed at him. Threatening with a pistol, he forced Ghulam back into the car and demanded his wallet. Caught off guard, the man was scared and didn't resist at all. He handed over the wallet, which contained about $3,000 in cash, perhaps hoping his joke about robbers would work and they'd laugh about it with friends later. 74-year-old Dorothy was in the back seat behind Ghulam, and Donna was in the driver's seat when Damien put the pistol to the doctor's head and, without hesitation, fired. Then he simply got into his car and disappeared from sight. On the way, he tossed the pistol and sped back to Pennsylvania. Donna, a nurse anesthetist and emergency care specialist, attempted cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, by all indications, Dr. Munda was dead. Most likely, he died instantly after the bullet hit his head. He didn't have a single chance of survival. Donna betrayed her husband for money, forcing her elderly mother to witness a horrific crime. The murder of Ghulam was brutal and senseless. The doctor had offered his wife $1 million. After a divorce, she could have calmly started a new life. And Donna herself was certainly not a hardened criminal, so what could have driven her to such extreme measures? Donna reported the incident to the police. She said she didn't see the robber's face because he was wearing a ski mask. Donna also lied about the make of the criminal's car, but her mother, Dorothy, confidently stated that the attacker was African American. And these weren't the only discrepancies in the women's statements. Donna insisted it was her husband's idea to pull off the road, while Dorothy claimed her daughter had turned onto the shoulder herself. Of course, these were minor details, but as they say, the devil is in the details. The biggest inconsistency was that people are rarely robbed and killed on the shoulders of toll highways. So why did the criminal shoot only one person and leave the other two untouched? Why did the two witnesses to the incident tell different stories? There were many questions, and many things didn't add up. A few days later, Donna appealed to the public for help. She begged anyone who knew anything about the attack to contact the police. The woman played the part of a grief-stricken widow and recalled what a good, kind, and loving person her husband had been. Her prayers were answered. 6 days later, the police received an anonymous call. The informant told the authorities that Donna Munda and her lover, Damien Bradford, were involved in the case. The caller claimed the widow had helped Damien buy a car for $17,000 and rented an apartment for him. It didn't take detectives long to identify the anonymous caller. It was Charlene McFrazier, Damien's former roommate. In fact, Charlene wanted to frame Donna, but inadvertently implicated her former boyfriend as well. The police obtained a search warrant for Damien's apartment and found blood-stained clothes, cell phone bills, and Ghulam's money there. That was enough to arrest him. While the guy was in jail, detectives gathered evidence. They had already determined, using cell tower data, where Donna and Damien's cell phones were at the time of the crime. Bradford counted on Donna's support. She was supposed to go to the police and explain that they had arrested the wrong person. The lovers had an agreement, but Donna didn't keep her promise, and Damien took it as a sign that it was every man for himself. The guy made a plea deal, confessed to the murder of Ghulam Munda, and agreed to testify against his lover. When the widow stood trial, her lover was the prosecution's main witness. Thanks to his plea deal, Damien Bradford was sentenced to 17.5 years, though he was the one who pulled the trigger. He was nothing more than a pawn in the game of a greedy woman. This unsavory story was discussed in all the news. Friends and family were shocked to learn about Donna's affair with a young man and her addiction to drugs. No one could believe that this hard-working, smiling woman had committed a crime against her husband for money. Donna Munda received a life sentence without the possibility of parole because she was the mastermind behind the murder. Donna had everything: a millionaire husband, a good job, friends. But because of her destructive addiction, she lost it all. Because of a foolish desire to keep her young lover, she took her husband's life and condemned herself to a life behind bars until the end of her days. If you have finished watching, You are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.